Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and for those who are watching. Today, we'll go ahead and continue our hybrid meeting. So if you are on Zoom and you have a question you'd like to, let me rephrase that. If you'd like to provide a public comment, then go ahead and raise your hand when the topic comes up so we can go ahead and acknowledge you and have you do your public comment. So we'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you're able to stand, please stand.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So today we get to start with the introduction of a new staff member. We will be meeting Natalie Harnett officially in her new role next time. Today we to officially meet our new IT manager who has been with the city for a while, and I believe that Greg Herman will be introducing him.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor and Council members. I'm super excited to be able to introduce Josh. Come on down. Josh Erkiaga as our new IT manager. Josh has been with the city for 7 years as a network administrator and eventually moved up to the role of network services supervisor in 2019. In that role, Josh and his team were responsible for all aspects of our city networking, server storage, radio equipment, and phones. During that time, Josh also earned his certification as a government chief information officer. In Josh's new role as IT manager, he'll lead our very capable IT team, including our network services staff and information services staff, and supporting all the different organizational technology that enables us to provide excellent service to the community. And with that, I'm super excited to hand it over to Josh to say a few more words.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, Mayor and Council members. Just like to say I'm grateful for the opportunity to take on an exciting new challenge like this. I'm honored that I get to lead a team of professionals that are super knowledgeable, dedicated to supporting the city and its technology. And I'm looking forward to all of the innovative things we're going to do over the next few years to help enable our city staff to better support residents and to take care of the work that all of you are going to put forward for us to take care of. So excited to be in this role, and thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next, I get to provide a proclamation to the Rotary Club of San Luis Obispo. It is their 100th anniversary. I will go ahead and read the proclamation and then provide it to Barry, Banner Kellen, so that you can share a little bit about the Rotary in a few minutes. So I'll go ahead and read it very longly. Yeah, okay. Whereas the Rotary Club of San Luis Obispo was established in 1923 as the first Rotary Club in San Luis Obispo and remains dedicated to supporting and improving the quality of life of all residents of San Luis Obispo. Since its establishment on December 3rd, 1923, through its members, the Rotary Club of San Luis Obispo has worked to create and improve community spaces, including creating Edo Park and building enhancements to Mission Plaza, Laguna Lake Park, Mitchell Park, Sinsheimer Pool, Sinsheimer Stadium, to name a few of the more than 30 major projects. Over the past 100 years, through its members, the Rotary Club of San Luis Obispo has worked to improve the natural environment by protecting open space and planting more than 2,000 trees throughout the city. The Rotary Club has awarded more than $1 million in scholarships to San Luis Obispo High School and Cuesta College students to pursue post-secondary education and training. Since its establishment, the Rotary Club of San Luis Obispo has donated money to local nonprofit and community groups, including the first gift of the fundraising campaign to build the Performing Arts Center. The Rotary Club of San Luis Obispo has extended its support to the people of, I'm sorry, I'm going to mess up the word of this name, Compostela, Mexico, for more than 30 years, including involving Cal Poly faculty and students in projects. In 2023, the Rotary Club of San Luis Obispo is celebrating its 100th anniversary of action that improves residents' lives today and invests in programs and projects for the future. I, Erica A. Stewart, Mayor of the City of San Luis Obispo, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby recognize the Rotary Club of San Luis Obispo on its 100th anniversary and its continuing valuable role within the community.
Well, thank you very much. I have the privilege this year of serving as president of the Rotary Club, and I certainly understand that my involvement in this club is minuscule compared to the legendary people of San Luis Obispo who have come before me and have come before us in the Rotary Club now. Do you know that it's hard to distinguish if leaders become Rotarians or Rotarians become leaders, but nearly 40% of the San Luis Obispo Citizens of the Year have been members of the Rotary Club of San Luis Obispo. That is a very for me, that's a staggering proportion of recognition for the difference people in Rotary have made in this community. From the very beginning, this club has been dedicated to the people of San Luis Obispo. In fact, one of the first donations it made was to help fund the very first Welcome to San Luis Obispo sign. And since then, it's just been building up and building up. In the last 10 years or so, we've really committed ourselves to scholarships, investing in the future. And in the last 2 years, we've given more than $120,000 in scholarships to San Luis Obispo High School students and Cuesta College students. And our goal is to increase that amount. We are committed to creating and protecting and enhancing the natural environment. We're committed to creating and enhancing community spaces. It's in those spaces, in the natural environment, in spaces where community can be built, with a shared experience that is beyond any structure. It's almost like free-form play. And it's very important to us that we build and sustain community. We fully acknowledge, like I do, the club does acknowledge that we have inherited this legacy that was created by the people that came before us. We are working hard to nurture that legacy and to enhance it so that the next generation, the people who come after us, will have an even bigger impact on the quality of life in San Luis Obispo. So on behalf of all the Rotarians, thank you. And I look forward to the next 100 years. And if you're at the 200th year anniversary, please send me a prayer, send me an email, but I probably won't be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we also have another honor, goodness, I can't even get it out. We also have another Rotarian here at the dais, and didn't know if you want a few words, Jan.
Yes, well, I'm a member of the Rotary Club de Tolosa, which the Rotary Club of San Luis Obispo started maybe 70 years ago, something like that. But for many years, I was also in the Monday Club, or we call it the Monday Club. And it's a great organization. I encourage anyone who's interested to just start asking questions and come visit, come to lunch, and see if you are ready to volunteer. It's a great organization and a wonderful way to make friends. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Well, now we get to typically listen to the city manager share the city manager report, and today we get to have Assistant Manager Whitney McDonald.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to present the city manager report this evening, and this is my debut presentation, so hopefully all goes to plan. So kicking it off this evening, we want to highlight an opportunity coming up this Saturday, November 18th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. For anyone ready to roll up your sleeves and connect with fellow trail enthusiasts. Our Ranger Service is looking for volunteers this Saturday to come and maintain city trails in San Luis Obispo. This volunteer opportunity contributes time, talent, and physical efforts to assist the City of San Luis Obispo Parks and Recreation Department's Ranger Service Division with hands-built sections of trail construction. You can sign up at volunteer.slowcity.org and come out and be a literal trailblazer for us here in San Luis Obispo. Next up, we're also highlighting another event that our Parks and Recreation Department is hosting along with the senior board, which is the Golden Decades Holiday Party. This will occur on Thursday, December 7th at the Senior Center. So folks can jump back in time with their poodle skirts, leather jackets, and favorite music to enjoy classic 50s themed meals, holiday themed activities, and more. It is a family-friendly event for all ages, so please go and visit slowcity.org/seniors or call the Senior Center at 781-7306 to sign up to attend. It is a cost of $10 for Senior Center members and $15 for non-members. Next up, we wanted to kind of remind folks of where we're at after our discussion last week regarding parking and our updates that we are putting in place quickly right now. So first, highlighting a 12 days of free parking for the holidays. This was a planned event, and we're happy to roll that out in the coming days. So Thanksgiving Day, the day after Thanksgiving, what we're calling Small Business Saturday on November 25th, Sunday, November 26th, Sunday, December 3rd, December 10th, 17th, 24th, 25th, 26th, and then New Year's Eve and New Year's Day are all free parking downtown in our public structures. Also wanted to remind everyone of where we're at in rolling out the direction provided last week to start our 1 hour free parking and free Sundays in our structures. That will be up and running on Thanksgiving Day. And just to help kind of frame the math a little bit, it always helps me too when I have other folks remind me that what that ends up doing is providing a savings of $3 per day and up to $12 on Sundays. So essentially that is a benefit that we're providing to the public beginning on Thanksgiving Day. So again, that's 1 hour free in the public parking structures and every Sunday in the parking structures, as well as importantly during the downtown holiday parade, which is coming up soon on December 6th. Hopefully that is the correct date. First, thank you. Yes, just got a little bit of time forward. Okay, moving on. We're also highlighting where we're at in our slow in motion projects and work areas. So construction continues on the North Truro Greenway Neighborhood Greenway project with the addition of speed tables and speed humps on Ramona Drive, Broad Street, and Farini Road. The contractor is installing more bike medians along the new Greenway route, specifically from Walnut to Mill. The contractor is continuing on the beautification of the Truro Street Highway 101 underpass with the installation of irrigation, landscaping, and fencing. And I'm sure for everyone who traverses that area every day, you're seeing the work, in progress. In addition, our pavement maintenance and mobility improvements are continuing as part of our 2023 arterials paving project. The contractor is currently working on installing signage at various locations, and after the signage, they'll move on to culvert and sidewalk repairs on Monterey Street. Paving has been completed on California Boulevard, which we've highlighted here up in one of those photos, and everyone loves, a newly paved road, so have at it, it feels amazing. While paving conflicts are still being resolved on La Loma Court, Santa Barbara Avenue, and Orcutt Road. Commuters should expect some travel delays and lane shifts throughout these work zones, and project area maps have been created to help clarify these work limits, as well as ongoing updates at our Slow in Motion website. Okay. Next up, we love announcing great news about some of awards and work that the city's been doing. The city of San Luis Obispo is one of 119 cities to receive a top score on climate action from CDP, which is an environmental impact nonprofit. A-list cities build climate momentum, taking 4 times as many climate mitigation and adaptation measures as non-A-listers. Only 13% of cities that were internationally scored in 2023 received this A score. So it's really quite an achievement for us and a marker of all the work that you all as council and staff and the community have been doing to lead the way in our climate action goals and plans. This is really designed to encourage and support cities to ramp up their climate action and ambitions. And so we're incredibly excited to be chosen as one of those cities. To score an A, among other actions, the city must disclose publicly through a program called CDP ICLEI Track They have a citywide emissions inventory and have published a climate action plan, and must also complete a climate risk and vulnerability assessment and have a climate adaptation goal to demonstrate how it will tackle climate hazards. These cities are demonstrating their climate leadership through concerted and effective action, just as national governments will be asked to do at the COP28. And again, they're taking 4 times as many mitigation and adaptation measures as non-A-list cities. And so it's just a really amazing opportunity for us to take a step and take note of the hard work that everybody's been doing, and we're being recognized for that great work. So thank you for the leadership and to the community for their work on that as well. Also, next up, we wanted to kind of remind folks of where we're at. We know we're anticipated to get some rain this week, and given not only the rain events from last year, but also the Lizzie fire and concerns about what happens when the rain comes, we wanted to highlight where we're at. So the burn scar, of course, is a concern. We've been, clearing out vegetation and work with our partners to remove vegetation and debris. Also, we've cleared out the drainage and inlets that are at the base of the hill to make sure that those are clear in the event of water flow off of the hill. And so we've been actively assessing and addressing these risks, along with participating with the State Watershed Emergency Response Team. So we just received an update today that they've made a recommendation that a 1-year rainfall threshold is sort of where they start to look for potential concerns. So we're looking at the 0.5 to 0.9 inches in 1 hour for where we might start to see, I think, some runoff. And so that actually tends to line up a bit with where we start to get a little bit concerned with rainfall overall citywide, which is essentially 1 inch per hour is where we start to get a little concerned about some flooding impacts in key areas. Luckily, what we're seeing with the storm now is we're not anticipated to get over 0.5 inch per hour. So that's the most up-to-date information we have as of earlier today. So that's just to give everybody an idea of what we've been doing, what we anticipate coming later this week. And that's not to say we shouldn't keep preparing. I think a good kind of marker for folks to be aware of is if you needed sandbags last year, it's always a good opportunity to get working on your sandbags for this rainy season coming up. And so just wanted to highlight that for people. Our public works crew and staff have been working on trying to gear up for essentially sandbag season as well, but it's always a good time to get started on that. Okay. And that, I think, wraps us up for the city manager report this evening.
Thank you so much. I on the same day as the trail cleanup is also downtown slow cleanup, so there'll be a lot of cleaning up happening. Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate your going through the parking decisions, because there was, a lot of conversation that night and moving forward. And I'm wondering if you can clarify the different structures still have, even though we've talked about eventually there might be some shifts or the sequencing, but if you could just clarify the 2 structures, you still take tickets, but the other one, even though the first hour is free, you still need to initiate a session. Is that right?
That's correct. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify. Yes, and the 2 gated structures will remain the same. It's just that when you go to leave, you won't have to pay for that first hour of the time you were there. For the gateless structure at 847 Palm here, we do still need people to what we call initiate a session. So if you're using an app, you need to go ahead and sign in, and you'll be asked for the time that you intend to stay there. If you stay for 1 hour, your charge will be $0, so it will be actually free. So that's it was really important to us when thinking about and implementing this this program. If you're paying at a pay station, the same thing will be true. You will get a receipt that says $0 if you're there for 1 hour. Anything over the hour, then you would pay for. If you're using an app and you start a session and you're there for more than an hour, you will be charged a transaction fee that applies according to the app's normal schedule. So if you're already using an app, I think you've been used to the transaction fee, but it would only apply if you're there more than an hour.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think that's helpful for the public to remember because the gate will be up, and if they think that it's less than an hour, that they'll be there, even though there won't be a charge, they do need to get in that habit. So for folks who are uncomfortable with that, either go to different structures, or I think we're talking about maybe bringing in some tech-friendly students to come and help people and put an app in place. So super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you so much. For our residents who are looking ahead to preparing with their sandbags, can you remind us the locations of where sand is available and the timing of all that?
Thank you. I think I'm going to need to phone a friend with our Public Works Director, Matt Horn, is in the audience. I do know he'll be able to identify the exact locations.
Thank you.
Trying to look it up actually right now. We have 4 locations for sandbags. We will stock sand prior to rain events coming in. So 25 Prado Road will have sandbags. Additionally, at Sinsheimer Pool, that area will have sand. Then we'll have sand at 2 other locations that escape me right now. I apologize. I'll follow up with this information a little bit later.
And just to be clear, there won't be sandbags. People have to go ahead and purchase those ahead of time and then come and fill them up at these locations. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. Thank you for correcting me on that too. And so you can go to Home Depot or Farm Supply are usually the places that have sandbags. If you needed sandbags last year, you're probably going to need sandbags this year. So start, getting those sandbags together.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Horn.
Thank you. Great question. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thanks. Yeah, just a quick question about the climate action prize. That was great. So we're one of 119 or 116 cities in the country, in the state, in the world. I'm just curious, what's the the framework for that? Sorry, we hit it at the same time.
Okay. Now
It's
we
the
can-
country.
Yeah, it's nationwide. Thank you.
And in other news, I do have the 4 sandbag locations in case that would be helpful. So they are the Courtyard, Laguna Lake Golf Course parking lot, Santa Rosa Park parking lot, and Sinsheimer Park parking lot.
Great. Thank you. And sorry for the technology. Councilmember Shoresman.
It's okay, that technology break got us a chance to find out where the sand is. This is for, I guess, for Parks and Rec on the trail work day. I'm just wondering if there's any age restrictions to the age level of volunteers that can participate in something like that.
Good evening. Great question. As long as they're with an adult, 18 and over, we kind of prefer like a 12-year-old and up age group. Traditionally, it's just because it's physical labor and they're kind of hiking back in some of the trails, especially for the King Trail. It's a little bit farther back in the Irish Hills. And we do recommend everybody wear some gloves, proper clothing, closed-toed shoes, of course, and maybe a hat for sun or potential rain. So,
Thank you, that's
You're
why I
welcome.
asked.
Thank you. Great question. It's always hard to find volunteer opportunities for people under 18. So, well, thank you very much, Assistant City Manager. And we'll move to the next item, which is public comment for items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment?
Yes, we have one person, Jean Nelson.
That's-
All right.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dr. Gene Nelson. I'm a former prof at both Cal Poly and Cuesta, and tonight I'll be speaking as an individual, not as a representative of the Chumash Village Homeowners Association. So I'm speaking to criticize the Higuera Streets Complete project. I'd like to thank Jennifer Rice, Emily Francis, and Michelle Shoresman for their emails to me in regards to my correspondence. A general principle of good governance is that project costs must not outweigh project benefits. I and many members of the Chumash Village Homeowners Association have concerns regarding the most controversial aspect of the Higuera Complete Streets project. This is the reduction of a major arterial road, South Higuera, from 4 lanes to 2 lanes between Church Street and Margarita Avenue. This change will allegedly benefit a few bicyclists per day, but increase rush hour congestion delays for thousands, and I want to underscore that, for thousands of motorists, particularly because the controversial change begins only a few hundred feet south of the very busy Madonna Road, Higuera, South Street intersection. Has Caltrans weighed in? The few transiting cyclists will never have protected bike lanes through the Madonna Road, Higuera, South Street intersection. The adverse rush hour congestion impacts for those living off of Margarita Avenue, Chumash Drive, and Fontana Avenue, there is essentially no way out for about 1,000, I want to underscore that, 1,000 people. No way out except this planned congestion. Physical fitness is really important to me, and I know that's supposed to be one of the goals of this. I'll just simply say that I really love South Hills. I use it very, very heavily. And as a measure of that, I use tracking devices, and it shows that I've accumulated over 60 miles of elevation gain. So I take this really seriously. And what my informal survey is, I've seen more people hiking safely in South Hills than I've seen bicycling on Slows roads. That, I think, is really significant. I'm very skeptical of a claim that we use automobiles around 50% of our trips in SLO. I keep daily travel logs, and those logs show a dominance of 4 to 6 mile trips. And for many SLO residents, except students, I believe about 90% of the trips are by automobile, particularly among the large SLO area population that's over 50 years old.
Thank you. Thank you very much. 3 minutes are up, sorry.
Oh, boy.
Sorry.
I'll be back.
Okay,
because there's
thank
more
you.
to say.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
No, there are not.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to following up with Jennifer and team after today. Thank you very much for bringing that up. And our next topic is consent agenda. One thing I need to mention is that 5F and 5G have been moved to the December 5th City Council meeting. So if you have a public comment for those 2 items, hang on till a couple weeks from now. Any other public comment for the consent agenda?
No, we do not.
And do any of my colleagues have anything they'd like to pull? All right, can we get a motion? Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank staff for answering some of the questions and point out to the public that there was some agenda correspondence on a couple of these items. So thanks for those answers, and I'm happy to make the motion.
Great. Councilmember Francis.
I will second.
Great, thank you very much. And can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Shoresman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. I just want to thank the whole staff as well as the City Council for passing Slow Blues again at the baseball stadium in Sinsheimer Park. I think that is an activity that so many people enjoy at all ages and all levels, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity to continue. So there's so many good things always on consent agenda, but I really wanted to highlight that. So next we have 6A. which is how we're doing with money. Our fiscal year 23-24 first quarter budget review, and we have Finance Director Emily Jackson here to present the report. Sorry about that, jumped right into it. Today's a fun day with technology. Hang in there, everyone. No. Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Teresa.
Good afternoon, good evening, Council. Thanks for the patience on the technology issues. We'll go ahead. We've got a pretty quick presentation for you this evening, which is a really good thing in the world of finance because it means that things are generally on track and there's not a whole lot of issues to discuss. So I'll kick it off this evening with a restatement of our recommendations. Of course, as in prior quarters, it's that the Council receive and file the first quarter budget report, and then we've got a resolution for a budget amendment before you this evening, which we'll cover in the presentation. So as we typically do, we'll start with an overview of revenue for all of the city's major funds. That includes the general fund as well as the 4 enterprise funds. Things are really generally pretty on track compared to prior years. At this point, we've only received about 2 months, we have only received 2 months of revenue receipts for sales tax. And so this provides an apples to apples comparison for each revenue category within each fund based upon how many months of revenue we've received in this year compared to prior years. Things are down a little bit in some of the funds simply because we're experiencing the economic cooling that's happening throughout the country at this point due to geopolitical, really, and macroeconomic factors. At this point, it's really too early to tell what it means that sales tax, as an example, is lagging a little bit. But what I will say is in our conversation with HDL, our sales tax consultant last week, it was clear that as a county, SLO County is actually faring better than sales tax receipts are statewide. We know sometimes that San Luis Obispo County, just based upon our geographic isolation, responds a little bit more slowly than other areas of California to macroeconomic conditions. But at this point, based upon our own analysis and our conversations with HDL, we think it's too soon to tell whether this is a trend. And so we're waiting. We should get CDTFA sales tax numbers for the full quarter later this month. And typically what happens is that the last month of each quarter includes sort of a cleanup of sales tax revenue. CDTFA likes to have a clean break on a quarterly basis. And so in the third month of the quarter, there's typically a cleanup of any errors or anything that was identified as an issue in the first 2 months. So we should have a much better picture for you all at the second quarter report. But things at this point are generally on track. In the water fund and the sewer fund, there's modifications due to timing issues when we receive funding from Cal Poly for different projects, and then the rate increases that your council approved and went into effect on July 1st of this year. The parking fund is showing a pretty significant increase in revenue, and that's of course due to the parking rate increases that were approved earlier this year and went into effect on July 1st. And then the transit fund is also impacted pretty significantly by funding on a year-over-year basis, just based upon the timing of the drawdown of federal funding to fund most of the programs within the transit fund. On the expenditure side of things, as of the first quarter, things look a little bit out of whack, but that's typical for the first quarter. The reason for that is because at the beginning of the year is when departments set up POs and encumber funds. So not all of the funding has been expended, but it is certainly obligated and tied up in a purchase order. And we expect that as the year progresses, things will continue to even out as they do, and things will look a little more in line with where you would expect them to be based upon the progression through the fiscal year. But generally things are on track for this point. Of course, there's always major projects that happen, one-time expenditures that occur throughout the year. This year, of course, we had the fiscal health contingency plan in place, and a part of that was continuation of the hiring chill that was put into place to help mitigate against any fiscal impacts related to the storms we experienced last fiscal year. That hiring chill has now been lifted, but there was certainly a point towards the beginning of this fiscal year where positions were held vacant for a little bit longer than they might otherwise be, which in addition to just natural attrition helps to explain why staffing is at only 20% expended. Consistent with prior quarters, in addition to covering high-level financials, we also touch base on progress made on major city goals. There's two items to highlight this evening. There were two strategy and tasks identified in your council's adopted major city goals that were initially expected to be complete in the first quarter of the fiscal year, but were not due to a variety of different reasons. Both of these projects are still moving forward. The DEI statement is taking a little bit longer to be developed as a part of the DEI strategic plan, but that's expected to come before council this winter still. And then on the housing and homeless side of things, the public safety community service officers that program continues to be built. It's already proven to be a pretty significant force multiplier in the downtown area, but we are continuing to actively interview folks, get those folks trained up and out on the streets, and are currently in the process of converting contract employees to permanent FTEs. So that program is certainly alive and well, and already having a positive impact on the community and especially our downtown area, but just taking a little bit longer to get the positions filled and get everybody up and running. On the capital project side of things, like we've talked about previously, we're really in the implementation and construction phase of a lot of really large scale projects that we've been planning for years and sometimes decades in the case of the parking structure and the wharf project. And so there's a number of projects that have been completed through the first quarter of this fiscal year, including the gateless entry at 842 Palm, the pedestrian crossing improvements, the railroad safety trail fencing, and silt removal. In addition to that, I think it's important to note that Public Works has been pretty inundated with storm projects, and as we've discussed previously, those are pretty high priority projects at this point, both because we want to get the money spent so that we can get it back, hopefully, from the state and the feds, and also so that we can prepare ourselves for the coming rainy season so that we don't make any potential problems out there any worse, and we can prepare to help keep our community and our businesses safe. In addition to that, like I noted, there's just a number of very, very large scale projects that are in in construction or nearing completion, and we hope in future quarters to be able to let you know that some of those have resolved themselves and are complete. Storm update. So we were before you, gosh, I think about 6 weeks ago with the year-end report. The estimates on storm damage were a little bit lower at that point, but like we've talked about, we expect that our estimates will continue to climb just as we're continuing to move forward with getting these projects designed, figuring out the engineering, and actually determining what the costs will be. So we're continuing to have monthly check-ins between finance, fire, public works, and the city manager's office to kind of have eyes on all of the projects. What are the priorities? What are the costs? What are we going to proceed with? And at this point, our storm costs are estimated to exceed $35 million. We've spent about $7.5 million to date, and we're in the process of continuing to work with FEMA to get the project submitted and get on the road to reimbursement. So like we've talked about previously, we still expect that based upon advice and guidance provided by our disaster recovery technical assistance consultant, that we should see reimbursement on some of these projects within 12 months of submitting them to FEMA. And I'm happy to report for the first time in one of these quarterly updates that we have 10 projects submitted to FEMA. $2.5 million, but you got to start somewhere. It's a really, really, really long process to get to the point of submittal. And so a number of these projects were submitted about a month ago. So we're hoping that in about 11 months, we'll start to see some repayment for the costs that we incurred. About just over half of that was related to January debris removal. And important to note, of course, like we've talked about previously, that in general, we hope to receive 93.75 reimbursement. That's the maximum that we can get from both the feds and the state. And we have a special opportunity from FEMA to get a full 100% reimbursement for debris removal, which is why that's called out. So working towards that, actively responding to questions from FEMA every single day, but we're moving forward, and we actually have an additional 6 projects in the queue that are undergoing final review by our consultant before they're submitted to FEMA. And then finally, to wrap up the presentation tonight, there is a recommendation included along with the report to approve a resolution to effectuate a budget adjustment to allocate $150,000 worth of economic development fund balance, which is assigned only to economic development for those purposes, to fund both the Buy Local bonus and Eat Local bonus programs at a total of $125,000 and various downtown and community activations for an additional $25,000. So those recommendations don't have any impact to the general fund. There's no trade-offs associated with that. This is funding that council had previously appropriated at a high level for economic development activities, and this is just the follow-through and the implementation of that prior direction should you choose to approve it this evening. So looking forward, one of the other things that the finance department is working on right now is wrapping up the 22-23 audit. We are expecting to meet all of our obligations to have the ACFR posted by the end of the calendar year. We expect that we'll actually be a couple weeks earlier this year. We're continuing to closely monitor and update revenue projections and any expenditure forecast changes and adjust as necessary. And then we're working to create recommendations for use of our one-time unassigned fund balance from the prior fiscal year 22-23. And those, like we talked about at the fourth quarter report, will come before your council from staff at the mid-year budget update on February 6th. So with that, that concludes the presentation, and we are happy to take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the presentation. Great to see that we are doing well. While I know the sales tax, we don't necessarily know what the revenue looks like as we continue, but thrilled that we're continuing to pay attention to it, obviously. Councilmember Shoresman.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of questions, some that were brought up by your slides. Great presentation, and it's kind of early in the year, so a lot of these numbers are not super indicative of how the rest of the funding and spending is going to go for the rest of the year. I understand that. I think on slide 4, you had sort of a summary of expenses to date for the first quarter. Yes, that's the one. And hard not to notice the transit fund there seems 69% consumed, seems like a big number. I was just wondering if you had any indication of what that's about and what's causing that.
I believe, and Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's probably the transit contract, is we've got money tied up for that purpose.
So that's encumbered but not spent,
Correct.
basically. So, okay.
Correct.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That makes sense. The storm expenses and costs, and I know that's a bit of a moving target as well. And it's pretty hard to wrap your head around, how much we've spent versus how much we've allocated versus how much we think our total expenses are going to be and what we might be able to get back from FEMA. But so forgive me if I've asked questions like this before, but just bears getting more clarification about. So if our total estimated costs are about $35 million, and we think that if we get all the reimbursement back that we could, that's 93%, correct, of that $35 million. That leaves, in my rough math, about $2.5 million that will be our responsibility, assuming that that's best case scenario, and that's all we have to spend sort of our own money with FEMA reimbursement. Where does that money come from? Does it come from the Infrastructure Investment Fund or the general fund, or where does that come from?
Yeah, so that's kind of a bridge that you cross when you come to it. I think it really depends on what's going on at any given time. I mean, the good news and one of the things that we communicated back in October when we presented the unaudited year-end financials is that we do expect to have an unassigned general fund balance. That's an option for how we could spend down some of that funding. But our expectation and our plan has been to work through these projects as we have the funding and as we have the staff capacity to do it. And so what that means is that there are a number of critical projects that we're working to address today to get ready for the next rainy season. And there's a number of important but not so critical projects that we're working to address, and we expect that we will factor those into future CIPs. And so I think at that point, I mean, we're planning at this point that storm-related work will probably span the next 5 years, and we'll see some storm-related projects in future CIPs. And so it really depends on sort of what the makeup of project requests are in any given year. As you know, we refresh the 5-year CIP every 2 years, and I expect that some of these storm projects will be submitted as a part of the CIP and will be ranked and stacked up against any other project submittals that come in. So hard to tell exactly what that trade-off will be in any given year. We're going to have to make some judgment calls, and the CIP review committee is really going to have to take a critical look at, how does the storm project that's submitted stack up against all the other requests that come in, but that's essentially the answer, is that it'll be factored into sort of our normal infrastructure improvement and maintenance process.
Thank you. That's helpful. And so even if it's not completed, even if some of the projects aren't completed for 4, 5, 6 years, if they were designated allowable by FEMA, they would still be able to be reimbursed even that far out, or?
Yeah,
I'm just trying to get an idea of how FEMA works, which I know is difficult.
I think that's a great question. We're learning more and more every day. We're working with FEMA. I mean, we have what we call dummy projects entered into their system, but not actually submitted. And so what those dummy projects do, and that's a FEMA term, is that they alert FEMA to what is coming. So we've currently got some estimate estimates of costs for each of those projects in there. And as we continue to go through the projects, refine them, refine what the scope actually was, and get to a point where we know actual cost, we're continuing to update the information that we have entered into their grants portal. But at this point, we have a certain number of projects entered in so that they have a heads up that more is coming and it's on their radar. I think that eventually, you know, our approach and our process at the advice of our consultant has been to submit projects once they are complete and we have all of the documentation and all of the justification for reimbursement. But I think we probably eventually get to a point where we just need to start submitting partial projects so that we can get the ball rolling and then update them as they go through the process, the FEMA's review process.
Okay, and then last question on the storm. We have allocated $9 million already in the 23-25 financial plan. Was that general fund that we allocated?
Yes, it was general fund operating, the operating reserve.
Okay, thank you.
And then there was an additional $2.75 million included in the CIP that your council adopted with the financial plan.
Okay. So it's sort of 11.75 total that's been dedicated in the financial plan.
Correct.
Not just the 9. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And last, the budget adjustment that is recommended, the $150,000 for economic development, the $125,000, that is very clear to me. Buy local, it's to supplement the buy local bonus program that we're about to get started with soon here in the holiday season. Just wondering a little bit of clarification if we could get on the $25,000 additional. I know it was for other activities that are kind of in the off season, but can you give us some examples?
Thank you, Councilmember Schwarzman. Happy to provide a few examples for everyone. So we have funding to take us through the holiday activations that's already in place as a part of the budget. We're using some of the money that was allocated as a part of mid-year last year to take us through February with some Lunar New Year celebrations. But we're looking to that additional $25,000 for activities in particular in March, April, and May, and really to get us up until the summer concert season to continue to keep downtown active and vibrant. Examples of what that might include: we've previously used funds like this in partnership with Downtown SLO to bring activities like the roller rink down to Mission Plaza to provide an activity for families to come down, enjoy themselves, hopefully spend some money out shopping and eating as well. So that is a possible example. That was a little bit more than the budget we have allocated tonight, but we'll look to what activities are available, what events are available, also different pop-up events and partnerships. We had some success during COVID with working with SLOMA to do art installations in Mission Plaza that both served as an opportunity for people to get out and come downtown and also experience some of the different arts and culture in our community. So we'll go back a little bit actually to that playbook and look to continue that programming up until early summer.
Great, thank you for that. Appreciate those examples.
Thank you. That was definitely one of my questions as well. Give me an example. Councilmember Francis.
Thank you to Councilmember Schwarzman for asking both my questions on FEMA and the 2 pots of money, and that's actually all I wanted to ask about.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. And my question is about there's a pot of uncommitted funds for economic development, the $464,000 that's remaining. And we heard last week a lot of concerns, different concerns about the success of downtown due to the parking changes. And I think we have mapped out some good longer, I mean, it's long, it feels long in the moment, in the spring, to be able to revisit those parking rates, think about some other sources of money. I guess what I'm wondering is, recognizing that economic development pot of money, no time like the present, because these are challenging times, and we are hearing, you know, some of the restaurants, et cetera. I guess I'm particularly focused on the employees, and, you know, we can converse about this at deliberation, but I'm wondering if there are programs that we might be able to fund with this in the, you know, maybe $100,000, $200,000, where we could, for example, have Prox cards at a discounted rate, or Prox card, it's at a discounted rate for income qualified. If you meet this threshold, then you can hit that threshold. Or maybe there's a way to have those validation, kind of the chaser tickets to go out to businesses. And I'm wondering, one, if, we've been kind of bantering around some ideas. So if somebody's able to talk about some of that possibility. And then is it premature, or is that something that we could, again, if colleagues were interested, be able to allocate a certain amount of money with a program not completely designed, but specifically targeted to ease the financial burden of our employees downtown? Not sure who wants to start on that.
I will start with the higher level picture as it relates to the economic development funding, and then I think our assistant city manager might have some more detailed thoughts. So a couple of things. One, just keeping in mind that this is one-time money, and so it isn't an ongoing funding source to be able to provide those programs. I think operationally, in terms of our parking program, we've got some commitments that we made at the last council meeting. So I think the priority is really making sure that we're able to see through those commitments in an efficient way to deliver for the community. And that anything we may want to do may be an expansion or building upon an existing program as opposed to putting together a net new program. And then the only other piece that I'll add is just those dollars have proved really valuable for us to be able to respond to emergent issues as they have come up in our community. And I think what you're describing is certainly one of those for us. But it's effectively an economic development contingency for us. And I think as we're looking ahead to the balance of this financial plan, I would just add that it has been helpful for us to be able to have that contingency to draw upon, to be able to fund programs as they have been needed in the community to respond to what's going on at that time. And so I think that there's value to retaining some level of balance in those funds for us to be able to access as needed.
Thanks.
Thank you. And then speaking a little bit more to the programs themselves in terms of what we think we may or may not be able to do, I think certainly our Deputy City Manager Herman mentioned that operationally anything new will take us more time, and that kind of concerns around effectiveness and how well we're able to roll something out is always a concern. If it's a matter of doing more of something we're already doing, that's a lot easier for us to implement quickly and effectively. So as an example, we already have our Prox cards, which are essentially your pass to parking structures. If we're talking about or considering a discount or some kind of, I don't know if it's a scholarship or an idea like that, I think it would be easier for us to implement, combined with the fact that we already have our downtown access program, which is available for folks who live or work downtown. It provides access to transit, but we can kind of maybe marry the two processes. We already collect that information through a different system and make it available for employees. We'd probably be able to find a way to do that together along with something like a Prox card or our 10-hour on-street parking systems, or another concept maybe around just increasing the validation options for businesses that maybe could then offer them to their employees. We know and we've heard that they're not always the most kind of user-friendly options for people. So trying to kind of work out how valuable is this going to be for our employees and businesses downtown. We'd probably want to confer a little bit with them, but those are the things we'd want to keep in mind if we're thinking about adding that kind of additional benefit using funding in the nearer term. And then certainly all of these options are definitely things that we will want to and need to explore as part of our rate study that was authorized at our meeting last week, because employee parking options was a specific item for a consultant to look at. So we'll certainly be looking at it in a much bigger picture, holistic way, but if that was a concern or desire by council tonight or on the near term, certainly considering the kind of concerns raised about just planning and the use of the economic development funds for other purposes. Obviously, that's incredibly important as well from our staff perspective. But on the parking end, we would just want to be careful to not create new programs, but to sort of supplement or amplify things we already have in place.
Super reasonable, and thanks, that's great information. And we've heard some concerns from employees and businesses, but I'm not sure that it's been kind of the alarm call at this point that might warrant that compared to other economic development. But perhaps there could be some inquiry with our business partners downtown to gauge the comparative value. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Well, a lot of my questions have been asked already. I just wanted to get a little more clarification about those Measure G funds. So there's about $4,000. The original intent was economic development and homelessness. And we got an agenda correspondence today saying that the $300 that was allocated to the homeless projects has already been spent. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about what it was spent on. And the other thing is how much, in terms of that 400,000, has that been really earmarked for economic development, or is that something that could be reconsidered at the time that we're looking at the homeless situation? I'm thinking specifically, there's kind of been a slowdown with the county in terms of the Hope Village over there by the Department of Social Services. And at some time there might be a possibility that the city would need to pitch in something. So how much cast in concrete is that division?
I think Deputy City Manager Herman will answer that.
Sure.
Sure. Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks. Happy to answer that question. I'll start with saying that it's clearly within council's discretion to use those funds as they see fit. How we landed at the recommendations we did, in particular the resolution that we're discussing that speaks about economic development and homelessness, that deals with about $3.4 million in local revenue measure funds from 2020 that was unbudgeted, that just came from the timing of when that sales tax measure went into effect. It started in April, and we had not anticipated those funds until July of that following year, so there were one-time funds that were available. Of that $3.4 million, a portion, $300,000, was dedicated to homelessness. A big portion of that actually funded our first contract with our homeless response manager position for a 2-year period. So a big portion of those funds went to that. And the reason that resolution was entitled Economic Development and Homelessness is because it was those combined purposes. The money that we're speaking about this evening, that balance, if the council moves forward with the $150,000 allocation this evening, is about $474,000. That came from a $2 million investment into a tenant improvement grant program. The goal was to ultimately use that as principal to create, to invest and create some interest that we're able to basically write down the cost of tenant improvement grants. That didn't come together for a variety of different reasons. We ended up just doing direct grants out of that and have spent down those $2 million as is detailed in the report. The reason why it's earmarked or designated as economic development is because they're local revenue measured dollars, and so they go through an allocation process via REOC, which the council is familiar with, and ultimately a recommendation of the council. And so they're designated under a business retention and economic development spending priority. And our practice with local revenue measure dollars and projects is that when those dollars are reallocated, if there's completed projects or a project isn't needed, we try and keep it within that spending priority. And that's been reflected in a couple of different budget documents with council since that time, but ultimately it's the council's discretion to use those dollars how they see fit.
Thank you. That helps me understand a little bit more. So I also wanted to, when we're talking about possible uses for the economic development funds, I've been talking with people in the Downtown Association Board about possibly having some kind of a website or program where employees could carpool. In other words, when we hear from employees, and just anecdotally, it's like, I'm driving my car there, so this is a person in a car, and I have to pay, it's like a whole hour's worth of my wages are going to pay for the parking. So I'm imagining, so far we haven't heard from anybody who, I mean, it's kind of origin destination studies, like the downtown's really pretty small, you know. I mean, we think it's big, but it's pretty small. So if somebody were working at Urban Cafe and somebody is working House of Flower and like that, but they live within a block of each other, I don't think the employees or the employers know where these people live or where they're going or what their hours are. So there are programs I know, actually MindBody started out as a way of keeping track of part-time employees for, I think it was Kona, I can't remember, some sandwich thing. But anyway, I'd like to kind of throw that idea in the hopper when we're talking about it, because it might be possible. It takes some coordination, some thinking through, but it might be possible that some of these lower wage employees could actually carpool with each other. So, and the last thing I wanted to just mention, I mentioned this in agenda review today, but I also wanted to mention it. There's a problem collecting business license fees, apparently. And as long as we're looking at the business licenses and a way of getting a little more efficient in terms of getting them to pay what they owe, I'd also like to ask staff about the possibility of listing each rental unit separately. Right now, you can have one business license that would say, I own 5 homes or I own 5 condo units, and you get one business license. That makes it hard for people to know if we wanted to get a list of what units in our city are actually being rented out. It's hard to know that because it's all consolidated and clumped together in terms of the business license information. And we have all kinds of requirements that go with the business license. I know I had a business in my home and there were all kinds of things I had to do. If we wanted to add anything that had to do with tenant, the conditions of the tenants actually being improved, for instance, just requiring them to give a list of things that are like the basic, what we had with the rental housing inspection program, which is now defunct. However, it's a really good checklist. We could potentially require that somebody renting out a unit would have to just give that to the tenant so that they would know. I mean, it could be another list, but some way that the landlords would have to give notice to the tenants about the kinds of things that are really the landlord responsibility. So anyway, that's kind of an offshoot of the budget. But I did want to say that I think we need to really look hard at how we are handling our business licenses, not just for efficiency, but also in order to implement some of our policy goals. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. And most of my questions have been asked, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward with only just one question. As we were talking about, as I was looking at the short-term rental, I was curious what the software was, but I don't really have to get into it right now. But it did make me wonder, are there software changes or something that we can do around the business license? Because I know we've improved through the years of getting our monies back. It's been huge, actually. But is there something different that we can do is something I was just curious about. I don't know if that's something we can answer today, but it is something I'm curious about.
Yeah, so finance is currently working with our community development department to kind of come up with a process for making sure we're doing the enforcement side of things. On just the collection of the business tax at this point, we're a little bit behind. We don't expect that we're going to fall short of our budgeted projections for collection of the business tax. We're just a little bit behind where we've been in prior years due to some staffing issues and quite a bit of turnover. but we have a very close to permanent position in one of the positions, one of the two positions that have been vacant for a long time, and we have a recruitment going for the second one. So my expectation is that when we have those folks on board and in a more permanent capacity than we've had for the bulk of the last year, that we'll be able to catch up in relatively short order and again, meet those business tax targets by the end of the year.
Got it. Totally understand. Just more staffing would be more helpful. And I just remember going through, most recently, I believe Mr. Herman was sharing around, we're collecting more information on each business than we had in the past. And so there's been a lot of improvement. So great to know. So thank you very much. Do we have public comment?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. Move on to deliberation. Councilmember Francis. Or not. Okay. Councilmember Schwarzman.
Are you sure? Councilmember Francis, I don't want to step on you. Light went off just as I pushed the button, so I'm like afraid tonight. Yeah, so I appreciate the report, appreciate all the thoughtful questions. Hadn't thought about the issues. I know it has been an ongoing issue of trying to get a handle on rentals in particular, but business licenses sounds like an interesting way to kind of get a better understanding of what is out there in the rental market and what's being used and what isn't. I'm fully supportive of the resolution. Appreciate the extra information on the $25,000 addition to the $125,000 proposal for expanding the buy local bonus program. Just at the downtown slow board meeting today, and I know that they're really happy to have not only the buy local bonus program in general, but just to have that potential of having it be bigger than was originally planned because it sells out so quickly. So looking forward to supporting that. Just had a couple of comments on what Councilmember Pease was saying about the use of the development funds, the economic development funds, and should we, maybe consider using that given the feedback that we got last week about the cost of parking permits. And we know that our employees that work downtown struggle with making ends meet and getting back and forth to work and having a place to park. I appreciate the thoughts about, how can we do that with maybe a discounted prox card or a validation program. And in the conversations that I've had with both business owners and employees thus far, it feels like people, those who know about the programs, are not using them for a particular reason because it doesn't work for them. So I guess my instinct is to say, let's maybe do some more inquiry first and figure out why these things aren't working very well for them and what might work better or what changes might work before we kind of enhance a program that maybe isn't as effective as we would like it to be. Especially I know I've heard lots of comments about the parking validation program and how it's just a little bit not super user-friendly for some people. They have difficulties with it. It's only useful for certain types of businesses or uses. And so we'd just like to see that kind of re-examined a little bit more before we put some more money into it, I guess. At least that's my opinion at the moment. Same with the downtown access pass. Really limited number of people and types of employees that seems to work for. So just needs some further examination, I think. And then to Councilmember or Vice Mayor Marks's idea about carpooling, just wanted to point out that rideshare.org has a ride matching program that I am guessing is pretty underutilized. It's right here on their website under rideshare.org. They will set you up with somebody, whether it's a one-time carpool or everyday carpool. And they also have, which I've never used and I've always thought I should try, is this program called a Guaranteed Ride Home, where if you ride your bike or walk to work and you find yourself, oh, you got to work and oh, shoot, I had a doctor's appointment in the middle of the day that I forgot about, you can use this Guaranteed Ride program to get yourself one way to and from whatever it was that you forgot you had to do that day when you decided to ride your bike. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there, and I'm happy to support the motion whenever somebody's ready to make it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Marks.
Yeah, I also support the motion, and I'd be happy to either make the motion or second it. I think we also should just give council, give staff direction from council to explore possibilities about how can we support, how can the city, within our policy limits, how can we support low-wage employees, especially in the downtown, who are often getting off work late. They're, they are especially vulnerable if they have to walk long distances to their car and they don't feel safe, and all these different factors. So it's a big mess. So I just like to ask staff to, yeah, you guys are great, you're brilliant, and you can come up with a possibility so that we can see maybe at mid-year or at some other time, what kind of programs could we have. And I think the carpooling, the rideshare is great, but what I'm thinking about is more, and this is something to run by the Downtown Association. I did talk to Laura Mullen about it. Something that's more really local, really not countywide, but really just, okay, in these 2 or 3 blocks, are there ways that they could actually kind of also build community among the workers and the, yeah, I think this was a really great report, and I appreciate your ability to deal with all those numbers and present them in such a way that it's understandable. It's very great. So should I make a motion or should I wait? More to go. More to go, okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis.
I just really appreciated the discussion around FEMA and timing and the dummy projects that really helped me wrap my head around. We keep throwing these bigger and bigger numbers out, and one of the things I was finding challenging was, when are we going to actually hit those marks? When are we going to spend that 35 million or whatever it ends up being? And to understand that we have about a 5-year timeline was really helpful, and that it might go beyond that, and that we're looking at putting in the projects and populating them as we go, so that we have an idea of what those targets are, and FEMA has an idea of what those targets are. So thank you so much for that. I'm supportive of the resolution, and particularly the additional support in the form of the 25K for some downtown activation. I really loved the discussion around helping our downtown employees. I think we gave direction last Tuesday to really be focused on those types of programs, finding parking close proximity to where folks work, and making sure that they have access to all the programs that exist, exploring what programs would actually be helpful. I think that is really important. I think we heard overwhelmingly from the crowd last week that some of the existing programs just weren't doing what they needed to do. So thank you for all of that. And I had no idea about the rideshare guaranteed ride home. So thanks for telling me about that. That's very cool. And I will be supportive of the resolution when it comes up.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
Thank you. Thanks for the thoughtful discussion. I think that's the right step at this moment, is to acknowledge that the parking rate study will have some focused time for employee programs in particular, and ask of staff that if between now and then there emerges, as we work with our partners, a potential program that I think there would be interest in at least considering either additional funding to improve existing programs, expand, make them more accessible. But that's kind of a general direction, and I would support the resolution or the recommendation as proposed.
Thank you. I appreciate all the colleagues' input. I think this was really good conversation, and I do think there's an important factor that we, yes, talked about last time, but also again this time around the downtown employees. And I think it's a little more than the survey too. And I just also want to encourage people who are in business now and are employers of employees to really take upon yourselves as well to provide the education, and maybe we can help as a city be able to give that information to you as a business owner, because you know, I received many, many emails and talked to many people about, well, my downtown employee has this, my employee has a 3-hour shift and they're paying this much. Is it because they were running late to work and decided to park on the street? Or could they park on the structure? You know, there's all these different bits of knowledge that I think are kind of just missing. And that's what I've heard from people is just, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Similarly, more costly, but there's also the different rideshare companies, carpools as well. So there are different options for people if that's what they wanted to do. And I know in our transit innovation study, we had to table it to January, but I saw the bike share and the rideshare conversations in there. I can't wait till we can talk about that here. And I know on campus at Cal Poly, they have zip cars. So there's some, you know, great opportunities that hopefully can help our downtown employees in the future. I also look forward to hearing more about the business tax collection once you're fully staffed. I know that'll be a little bit. And also think about the Visit SLOCAL customer service and training they have, and maybe that will help employers as well a little bit just on being able to communicate some of these confusing things. So I believe that City Manager had an input, and then I'll get to you, Councilmember Schwarzman.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I first off want to just thank both Whitney and Greg for the comments and for Ms. Jackson for the report. And I wanted to back up just a little bit and just remind the council of some of the reasons, you know, why we allocated the 3.4 million originally from the measure sheet. I think Mr. Herman talked about that briefly, but it really was a glide path, and it's one-time money to really get us through, I think, some very difficult times in COVID, and then through and out COVID. And as Mr. Herman mentioned, that's one-time dollars that will go away. You know, as you think about the long term, and this is really kind of planting some seeds about our mid-year in February, where we come forward with our recommendation on year end from 22-23, I think it's important to just remember that there's, you know, this economic financial turbulence out there, and how that ends up, you know, we don't really know right now. I mean, we heard from Chris Thornburg potentially about how that may manifest itself locally. But I'm looking ahead at the budget, and I'm seeing just some tension between both the ability, and Ms. McDonald talked about that, having to recalibrate our longer year CIP with some of the flood related expenses. And I think, you know, as the council knows, is that we've seen some inflationary pressures on our CIP as well. So, you know, you'll continue to hear me remind the council that I think we're going to have those pressures on our budget. You'll see some of those emerge when we come at mid-year. You're going to have some opportunity, and then you'll see those come again in the supplement in June. But certainly we take into account, we'll be watching the feedback from the community in terms of parking issues, and we've got some ideas at mid-year. So if council's inclined, you know, and if we're seeing some signals, we'll certainly be prepared for some options for council if the council is inclined to want to continue some short-term efforts, or if you want to consolidate those efforts as part of the fee study. So you've got some options, but as always, it's going to require some trade-offs both in the short and long term.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilmember Schwarzman.
Thank you for that. I think I'm content to see what the opportunities are at the mid-year, and then what comes out of the rate study for more comprehensive long-term programs and plans. And I think it's quite clear that we are all very concerned about downtown employees. And so that's obviously why we wanted that to be part of the rate study. And I'm happy to make the motion and move staff's recommendation.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say, I didn't get to say in my comments that I am also very supportive of our $125,000 for the Buy Local for the holidays, as well as for the Eat Local program for the California California Restaurant Month replacement. I think that was a really great tool and a really creative way of kind of replacing something that didn't exist anymore that needed to help the restaurants. And I also very supportive of the $25,000 as well. Vice Mayor Marks.
Yes, I'd like to just second the motion, and also direct staff to come back when we're talking about the parking rate study, to also include those possible options to help the downtown employees. All right, so that's a second.
Great. Can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Schwarzman?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll see you back about 7:05-ish. All right. All right, thank you so much. We're going to get back to it. We have the approval of the purchase of 1166 Higuera Street and authorization of the execution of the purchase and sale agreement. I will hand it off to Assistant City Manager Whitney McDonald.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and Council. I will be walking us through our presentation this evening, but we also have staff from our Public Works and parking staff, as well as our business manager and CSG manager here, Rebecca Bernstorff. So I think we're fairly well covered, as well as, of course, City Manager Johnson is available for any additional questions. Okay, so this evening, we're bringing forward this recommendation and possibility. So the city has been presented with the opportunity to purchase the property located at 1166 Higuera. This could provide a total of 44 new paid parking spaces, as well as 2 additional ADA spaces for use by the public, at least as a preliminary use of this property. Purchase and use of the property for public parking would facilitate greater access and economic development in the Upper Monterey Street area as contemplated in the downtown concept plan and other general plan policies. The proposed acquisition would also provide additional parking capacity in the downtown area as a whole and partially relieve any real or perceived challenges to the distribution and availability of parking spaces generally. Staff have completed negotiations with the seller as authorized by the City Council, and the final purchase and sale agreement is now ready for approval if so directed by Council. The purchase price is the equivalent of the property's appraised value of $4,720,000. It is estimated that improvement costs to get it to the point of having those 44 paid parking spaces and 2 ADA spaces would be about $125,000 to fully prepare the site for that use. So it is recommended that this purchase and improvement costs be provided by the city's infrastructure investment fund, and as presented and recommended through this, what staff has provided this evening, the parking fund would repay those costs through a 30-year loan. Just to be clear, the purchase of this property will not impact the rates or other actions taken by council last week, nor will it negatively impact supply. On the contrary, it would be providing some additional spaces for use downtown. It would also allow for the city to plan for development in the downtown, again, consistent with the downtown concept plan, and then provide the city the ability to really control a key piece of property in the downtown and make it available for, multiple different access uses in the future. So a little bit more information about the site itself. Council authorized staff to initiate real property negotiations. And again, we were looking at it as a public parking lot. It is 21,607 square feet, located on the corner of Toro Street and Higuera Street. And again, at that address of 1166 Higuera. This strategic purpose will support the vision of the downtown concept plan by creating better access and parking in the Upper Monterey Street area. Again, the purchase and sale agreement has been negotiated and is ready for execution, with escrow expected to close by the end of December of 2023. We have provided in the next slide a general parking layout that we believe we'd be able to accommodate pretty quickly on the site. So you'll see those 2 ADA spaces and those 44 other additional spaces. So the lack of public parking has been a hurdle to realizing the long-term vision of the downtown concept plan, which has included an idea for more residential and commercial development in this area. I want to move on to the next slide. Some of the details of the purchase and sale agreement include that the purchase price, the proposed escrow closing date, and then again, we've provided a recommendation on how that would be funded through the Infrastructure Investment Fund. It is also necessary for us to take a couple of follow-up actions with the Planning Commission, and we're currently, if authorized to move forward with these actions this evening, that would be scheduled to move forward on December 13th. The Planning Commission would consider determining conformance with the general plan and also issuing a conditional use permit to allow the paid public parking use on the site. Those two steps are included in the purchase and sale agreement as a condition of closing escrow at the end of December. So if we take a look at the general plan and zoning for this particular lot, it is designated as general retail commercial in the general plan land use element and zone retail commercial. This is intended to accommodate retail, business, personal, and professional services, as well as recreation, entertainment, transient lodging, and limited residential use. It is located within the Upper Monterey Special Focus Area of the general plan land use element, and we'll look at those policies in a moment that we've provided in a little bit more detail. The general plan land use element establishes specific guidance on development and redevelopment of sites in special planning areas like this one. Per city regulations, parking is allowed as a use with a conditional use permit. The block is bounded by Monterey Street, Higuera Street, Toro Street, and Santa Rosa Street, and shown in the downtown concept plan as public parking. So if you look at the shaded area, it's right in the middle of the screen that's shown under the number 23. That light blue area is this lot generally, and it is identified as parking in the downtown concept plan. So again, if moving forward with our recommendations, this would go before the Planning Commission to finalize those steps on December 13th. So if we look at the next slide, we've wanted to highlight this full set of policies is in the staff report, but we wanted to highlight for everyone what the Upper Monterey Special Focus Area says. So it identifies the Upper Monterey area as this special focus area for revitalization and enhancement, including the specific steps for the city to investigate a downtown parking district, which would allow for in lieu fee payments to kind of open up possible other public parking options for development that might not otherwise be able to satisfy their parking requirements on site. It also identifies the need for a downtown transit center in the Upper Monterey area, and this particular property has been looked at in the past for that possible use a few times. So this is something that both of those together give you an idea of some of the options that would be available to the city to help facilitate what we've been looking at in the Upper Monterey area for some time, and certainly since the Upper Monterey Special Focus Area was adopted through the land use element. Additionally, we've highlighted this last section, and I apologize for the number of words that are on the screen, but we wanted to highlight the fact that the Upper Monterey area has been called out as a focus area for a comprehensive plan and design guidelines that would really look at how do we want to facilitate economic development, revitalization, and increased density and development in this area. And parking has been identified as an impediment to that use by a number of our partners and interested developers in the area over the last several years. So by acquiring this property, it would allow the city to potentially facilitate each of these types of uses, whether through public parking itself, through the creation of a parking district, or potentially even through the development of a transit center. And again, all part of this idea of being a piece of the puzzle in that master plan or that comprehensive development plan in the future. So under our next slide, we're highlighting just the steps we've taken so far in due diligence of making this recommendation and proposal to council. Parking lot improvements that would become immediate would include signage, striping, installation of wheel stops, pay stations, and some improvements to the planter areas, landscaping. If you were to look in more detail, some of those areas there's bricks that need some improvements, and then a structure that's on site that it was used as a tattoo parlor for some time. We believe that structure needs to be demolished, and so the cost for that demolition have been included in the total request for funding for this purchase. And looking at financing, what we have presented for consideration is use of the Infrastructure Investment Fund to make the purchase and provide funding for that initial upfront improvement cost. And with a proposal that the parking fund pay the general fund back for that purchase over the course of 30 years at a rate of 2.88%. That rate comes from the LAIF, which is the, I wish I had it in front of me. Local investment. Thank you. Thank you. Local Agency Investment Fund. You know, just rolls off the tip of the tongue. The city holds a number of investments and in different types of funds, and that is one of the funds that we place money in order to make sure we're using our funding wisely and allowing it to accrue and not just sit idle. The 2.88% is the interest rate that we have been, it's a blend of what we've received so far this year in 2023. We use that as a sort of almost like if the money wasn't being used for purchasing of this property, it would otherwise be accruing something like this interest rate over that period of time. And that was why we came up with that recommendation. So using these terms, they have been included in the long-term financial forecast for the parking fund and the analysis that's been presented. Repaying at that rate would cost $118,500 in this fiscal year, and then $237,100 annually thereafter. Currently, the Infrastructure Investment Fund has a balance of $12.5 million. And so this would support a request for the 4.72 purchase price plus the $125,000 infrastructure or improvement cost that we've included as well. What we would anticipate doing is having that amount of money refunded or reinvested in the Infrastructure Investment Fund through future financial plans. And so we do not anticipate that the allocation of this money from the IIF at this time would create any impacts to other projects that have been that funding has been earmarked for. The Prado Road Interchange Project and the Prado Creek Bridge Project are both, the timeframes for those are far enough out that we won't need to spend that funding until later at the point that we believe we'll be able to replenish the IIF. So we've presented a long-term financial forecast for anybody who looked at our discussion and staff report and attachments from last week and our parking program update. This will look pretty familiar, although I'm finding I want to zoom in to see numbers, but if you're able to do that easier in paper format, this gives an idea of how we've looked at the potential impacts of both the purchase and revenue from the use of this site as parking on the long-term forecast of the financial fund. We wanted to make one note, and thank you to Councilmember Shoresman for asking a really excellent question about the revenue forecast. The long-term forecast published with the staff report indicated that in future out years, beginning in 25-26, revenue would be in the order of about $71,000 a year. We mistakenly had included a rate increase that had been adopted previously to go into effect in 2025. Currently, our plan is to bring that back to not implement that rate increase, so we needed to roll that out of the forecast here. We've provided a revised long-term forecast. It's shown up on the screen and also attached in our agenda correspondence. So this will not impact the financial discussions that we had last week. All the same decisions will remain the same. We have included the decisions that were made last week, so both including the 1 hour free within the parking fund and Sundays as well, free Sundays in the structures. So this gives you at least our most up-to-date financial forecast for the parking fund as a whole, if the purchase is approved as recommended by staff. So finally, it is our recommendation the council approve the purchase of 1166 Higuera Street, authorize the execution of the purchase and sale agreement, and approve the draft resolution, which would allocate the funding for the purchase itself. And again, we're here to answer questions and provide any additional information that you might need this evening.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much for the presentation and this, to consider this opportunity. Can you clarify, so if the annual payment is $237,000 to pay off the loan, and it looks, am I reading this right, that the anticipated income from the parking in that structure is the $71,000? Am I? So the out years where it says projected, or is the 60,000, is that the correct number? So then 60,000, not the 71. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. So then the net is 170,000.
That's right. Approximately $176,000.
Okay.
That's right.
It's a net payment. And then one of the alternatives is deferring that initial payment for, a few years, 5 years, something like that, and then we can accommodate that.
That's right, and we've actually, that is an option for council's consideration, and if we kind of go down that road some more, we might want to talk a little bit about findings and some changes to the resolution that could accommodate that.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my question. If we did want to defer payment, but I would say still have interest accrue during that time, what would the consequences be in terms of the parking fund, and also the consequences in terms of the infrastructure fund? So that would be one question. I had brought that up at agenda review, and I thought I could run the numbers. I don't know, were you able to do that? I don't know.
So we estimate, based on the numbers that we've included in the long-term forecast, the payment amounts each year include about $135,000 each year in that interest payment. So at the 2.88%, that's roughly the amount that would kind of accrue each year. And so one question that we might want to explore is, would the parking fund still make those payments so that they're not accruing and then, say, become a larger maybe balloon payment, or become part of the larger principal at that 5-year period, or would they just be deferred and then pay it in one lump sum later on? So those are other things we might want to discuss.
Okay, so we don't want to discuss them now, we want to discuss them later? Or?
Certainly, we're looking for that direction from council on the requested terms for us to include in the allocation and the resolution.
Okay, during deliberation. Okay. So my other question is, could you please explain a little bit about what a transit center is for the people in the audience? And yeah, what would a transit center be?
I think, so I can maybe kick off a big picture, at least my concept, but certainly I know there are others who have been here during those conversations when they came up in the past, but the ideal, I believe, is being really a location where you'd have your multimodal kind of buses and different types of transit coming together in order to provide a cleaner, easier to access location for people to use our transit services. But hopefully.
I'll have City Manager pop in on this one too.
Thank you.
City Manager?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and Vice Mayor Marks. I think there's a few of us virtually in the room and physically in the room that remember the discussion around the transit center. And I think, we can go back probably a decade or more. There's been a variety of different studies. And I think the general thrust of it is to try to consolidate, I think, the RTA and the city municipal bus services into one facility to really ease the process for bus riders, so there isn't any sort of confusion between walking back between different types of bus operations. I think moreover, it was also to try to relieve, I think, from the central part of the downtown, some of the congestion and some of the awkward turning movements with the buses in the downtown and create a more proper bus facility. So for example, that we could also consolidate previously Greyhound or Amtrak or today, Flixbus. So we have a centralized place in the city that ultimately buses, there's a common place where people can then get on the bus, so to speak. And the barriers have been really, thus far, has been really just securing property. If you recall, RTA years ago, I believe, had a grant approaching $2 million. It wasn't sufficient to acquire the property. And as a result of that, they had to forego the grant, or I think it might have been repurposed. And so we haven't been able to get over the first hump, regionally in our city, just acquiring some property to do some initial planning.
Thank you. Well, that's all my questions for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Shorsman.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a question about transit too, so I'll do that one first since we're kind of on that theme. When the transit center was considered for this area before, and it's my understanding that it was sort of a bigger site. This is a smaller piece of property, and so it's, I know it would take some engineering and design to even really look at whether or not it's feasible in this smaller site with different different access points to the streets than maybe the other site had when it was originally proposed.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Marks and Councilmember Shorsman. There were different iterations at one point before the Bank of America building was built on Santa Rosa and then the building on the corner of Monterey. There were different iterations of development proposals that came through that had some more intense development where there would be a concurrent parking structure and then also a transit facility. And so we spent quite some time, I would say more on a conceptual scale, figuring out, the number of buses in the RTA system, the number of buses in the city system, and making sure that there was enough bays for them to be able to park to support operations. And we were able to do that. If at some point we were to pursue, and that was the council direction at some point if the council moves forward with the disposition of the property, we could engage in that exercise. I believe that with some of the council members, there's been some projects that were shared that just recently were funded up in the Santa Cruz area where there was an affordable housing project combined with the transit center. There's some other projects around the state where there have been libraries and transit centers. So, this is certainly something that I think is possible, but we'd have to engage our transit partners and a transit planner to make sure how we would configure any sort of transit use on this property in the future and how it would, work with any other potential uses that the council contemplates as part of that planning effort.
So it appears to me though that with the, if we were to purchase this property now, it would be probably many, many years before we could put something like that together. It wouldn't be a short-term project that we could really engage in. We'd have to change a lot of priorities that are already in our work plans and ideas in order to get to that point.
I think it depends. I think that, there's a lot of creative partnerships that we have in San Luis Obispo. With Haslo, they do have quite a lot of projects that are in the queue. But I think, Council Shoresman and I did have a chance in meeting with the executive director. He did raise the idea of potential affordable housing, but you are right. It probably would take some time. And I think that's been the city's track record. If you look at Court Street, Hotel Slow, Hotel Cerro, we've held, these surface parking lots for some point, and then there's been a very deliberative process by which the council and the community make a decision about what's the highest and best use, giving all the other surrounding needs for that property, or what's the contextual needs.
Thank you. There was an article in the Tribune within the last day or two that talked about, and I know some people have had comments and questions about the project that was proposed most recently in 2022 for this site, and just wondering if you can kind of share some context around that, and would that be something that we would do, or is that project kind of dead, for lack of a better term, as of now?
The storage unit project?
The sort of food truck container, sort of a, I don't know, like a food court. Thank you. Struggling to find that word.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And Madam Mayor and Councilmember Shoresman, I think in my conversations with the current owners, we see lots of projects that move through the entitlement phase in order to create some certainty around, well, what are the conditions and what it's going to take to deliver that project. And for a variety of reasons, lots of projects don't move through. I think you've got the current owner of the property in chambers today, and I'm sure they can answer some more specific questions. But generally, my understanding is the project, quote unquote, didn't pencil out. There's some competing other similar like programs that have emerged in the downtown. The hub, we've got the marketplace, we've got Duncan Alley. And so for whatever reason, the current owners decided not to move forward with that project. It would not be the city's intent to move forward with that or to lease it for that purpose. We want to, hold it and decide through a process consistent with our general plan policies, ultimately, what's the highest and best use of that property moving forward.
Okay, and this is my last question related to the Infrastructure Investment Fund. I asked a question about this, and thank you to staff for answering that in agenda correspondence, but I just wanted to kind of call that out for folks that maybe didn't get a chance to read it, and ask sort of a side related question to that. What is the infrastructure investment? We had $12 million. You talked about it in the presentation. That's what's in there now. That's what staff are recommending that we use to purchase this property, and then have the parking fund pay the infrastructure investment fund back over the next 30 years. What is that money set aside for? What are the priority projects that it's set aside for? I know they're not planned until needing to access that money until 2025, 27. But what do we normally use that money for?
I'm happy to jump in on that. So the council has adopted a policy setting forth the appropriate uses of that funding, and it really is, intended for infrastructure investments. And so consistent with that, it has been allocated largely to the Prado Road Overpass and the Prado Road Bridge projects. So those are important projects that are, well down the road of our planning, but consistent with the agenda correspondence that we published, we anticipate being able to replenish the fund, and we will not be able to spend that money at this time on those two projects or on the projects that funding is otherwise being allocated toward at this time.
And we'll need a lot more money than just that $12 million to do both of those projects,
Correct.
Right? So
Correct.
We intend to build that reserve, I guess you could call it, that fund balance in that account to get to the point where we could either use that money and then get a loan for the rest for those two projects, or just trying to kind of get a picture of what that looks like, since that's clearly not enough money for those
That's
two
right.
projects?
So it depends
Or
on
funding.
the project. Sorry, of the two, the bridge project, we are required to provide not only a match, but also cover a portion of the project that is not otherwise covered by grants. So luckily, the federal government does provide a lot of funding for bridge replacement projects, but they do not pay for projects that go kind of wider or bigger than what you currently have in place. They'll kind of replace in kind, like a great insurance company. So anything that is bigger and better, which we do need in order to facilitate the overpass project, and also just deal with some constraints for everyone who's driven on that bridge probably recognizes that it's not super comfortable. So we do need to pay for that difference in the cost. That's, I think, the largest and most kind of pressing need for the funding in the IIF for that project, that we know that that's the portion we're going to need to pay for. But we do believe we will have that funding to replenish it with. The overpass, on the other hand, we are, that's a $101 million project, and obviously they, even 12.5 isn't going to get close. It will help us, though, with obtaining additional grant funding if we have that funding available, in addition to being able to pay for our design work and items like that. But again, we're not anticipating needing that this year, given just the scope and scale and timeline for that large project.
Can I just add on to that? So this year or in the next, how many years?
That's correct. I think for the overpass, we're looking at 27, 28 for actual construction.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it for me right now.
And Madam Mayor and Councilman, just to hop on a little bit, just to make sure we're clear in terms of if the council moves forward tonight with the recommended action, I just want to be clear with the council. I think our recommendation would be when we come back at mid-year with the unappropriated balances from the 22-23, our recommendation would be to replenish the infrastructure investment fund. And there's a number of reasons why. I think as Assistant City Manager McDonald pointed out, is that, we use that money. We're not a self-help county. We don't have a local source, so we really have to look to the general fund for these projects, that have regional benefits. And so having those grant dollars at our disposal helps us navigate the Caltrans process. Ms. McDonald and I had a chance recently to meet with the District 5 director to talk about some of these projects. They were optimistic that we would compete very well, understanding that, we are likely going to need to have some local match, and this is really that source that we look to.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Francis.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the presentation. And just actually a point of clarification on the last point you made, City Manager Johnson. Would that replenishment from the general fund be in addition to the loan repayments? So we're talking about a replenishment to backfill, but then in addition, we'd be making the payments. So this is really just a one-time influx of money, not as a result of the purchase, or is it a result of the purchase? I'm trying to understand if these two go hand in hand, or if we would be adding to that fund regardless of the purchase decision.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Francis, for asking that question. The idea is to replenish the funds that we would use for this particular purchase, and then so that we have the cash available to move forward with the project, because the timing, obviously, if the council moves forward with staff's recommendation, is a repayment over 30 years. And so the general fund would benefit, both from the infrastructure investment fund, which is one and the same. They would benefit from having that money immediately replenished, and then over time it would then gain, incrementally the revenue and interest payments that are paid by the parking fund on an annualized basis.
So are you saying that we likely would have had a recommendation to put additional funds into the infrastructure investment fund regardless, or not?
Absolutely. I think that, my comments earlier on your budgetary item about both the issues related to flood and inflation, Overall, I have a just general belief that, and it's consistent with your policies. And I'll just remind the council that your policies have a prioritization for use of one-time dollars at the end of the year. First is to pay down PERS. Second is for capital improvement programs. Three, I think is, can't remember the third category, and then other is another category. I'm sorry, it's eluding me right now, but you've got that prioritization. So it's clearly this is consistent with that. I'm sorry, it's unfunded liabilities, capital, equipment, and then other. So, it falls within those priorities.
Thank you for that. And then circling back, the language of the staff report really focuses on the use as parking, particularly in the context of kind of assisting with debt service and pay down. But we received a lot of correspondence that was really urging other uses. And I know we've had a lot of questions here tonight about the potential use as transit center or some sort of development with affordable housing. And these were all items that we had talked about previously when we were discussing this property. And so if the council determines a superior use in the near term and we want to urge staff to pursue some other use with this, how does that impact or change our debt service on this property, since we have that figured into our long-term forecast here? If we're no longer receiving revenues from parking, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I think ultimately, Councilmember Francis, let's say hypothetically 3 years from now, we have an opportunity to turn into an affordable housing site with a transit center. We would then go through a process, determine what's the fair market value, assuming that the loan was for the parking fund. There would be some exchange that would happen. We'd have to go through the Surplus Lands Act. And so we'd have to go through that process for good faith negotiations first for affordable housing. I just want to remind the council that that is a state priority. And so we would have to go through that process, and then there would be some exchange that would happen between whatever use that's happening, whether it's affordable housing or transit, that would need to be sufficient to extinguish the debt that the parking fund has incurred. And if assuming that all the market trends are, continue to move forward, the property is likely going to be more, worth more. And so likely it would be sufficient to pay the debt down. Plus it could be ultimately a windfall in terms of any value above the value today in terms of how that monetary exchange occurs.
Thank you for that. And I think my last question gets a little bit theoretical, so forgive me if this is a challenging one to answer, but we've talked about sort of the conceptual plans for long-term development in this area. And so my question kind of gets at what are the downsides to foregoing this purchase? To what extent do we still have control, or maybe not control, but influence over what type of development then happens in that area if we decide that we're going to let the free market decide what happens to this particular lot?
Great question, and Madam Mayor and Councilmember Francis, I think really then if it's acquired or if it's held by the existing property owner, then it can sit as it is today. They can move forward with a variety of uses that are allowed under existing general plan and zoning. So we don't really have the tools other than the tools that we have that are incorporated into our general plan policies or into our zoning code to otherwise exact any sort of other public benefits. Once the council buys the property, really, then it's up to the city, and you have a lot more discretion. You can entitle it. You can leverage it in terms of finding the things that, in my previous career with redevelopment, we used to do all the time in order to really build something that has public value and is a public amenity. But you don't have that ability if you're not the underlying property owner. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it really puts the city in the driver's seat.
Thank you for that.
If I might, just tagging on a little bit and elaborating a little bit on a a reference made earlier to a project that is occurring in the city of Santa Cruz. So that project received Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program grant funding in the order of $33.5 million to allow for a project that has affordable housing and a library. And the big piece of that puzzle was the city's ownership of the lot. So the fact that they owned the lot itself really opened the door to that kind of a project occurring there and enabling them to receive grant funding for it to happen. At least as far as I'm aware, they had attempted to do a project similar to that in the past, but that the lack of city ownership of the lot had been an impediment until they reached that point. So that's just to kind of give an example of the types of projects that we could look at potentially in the future with a lot like this, particularly kind of given its location. The other pieces as well in terms of development in this particular part of the downtown. The courthouse project, so we're aware the courthouse is anticipating to be moved to essentially what will be a block away from this location. And while they are not required to provide, additional parking beyond the little parking that they anticipate putting on their own site, you can immediately think about the type of uses that it's not just parking, but other types of kind of community-centered uses in this area. And that's just to give kind of one example of the types of things that we might see coming down in the future.
Thank you very much.
Are you saying that the current courthouse does not provide parking passes for their employees? Because I thought they did. No, jury, they get the little validations, but I used to work there. That's why I'm surprised that changed.
And I meant in terms of when they relocate, they will be building and anticipated to build a certain amount of parking for their judges and I'm sure some amount of their additional staff. I'm not certain about what their plans are for their other employee parking. I believe they currently have an agreement with the city for juror parking. It does have an end date on it currently as well, but these are all things that we're continuing to discuss with them as they look to make this additional investment in our community and our city to build a new courthouse and provide that amenity to our community.
Got it. Thank you so much. Vice Mayor Marks.
Yes, just to clarify, it sounds like to me that on a short-term basis that utilizing this property for surface parking is kind of a stopgap measure at this point before the city might have other options for it. But right now, we can afford it, and we've figured out a way to facilitate it. So it's kind of like a stopgap measure. Is that correct?
It is certainly our immediate intended use for the property, and we can always look at those future changes. And certainly as we look at, as an example, the kind of comprehensive plan and design guidelines that are called out in our general plan for this area, this piece of property would be a kind of key component of what things look like in the upper Monterey area. And then as opportunities come up or needs arise, it will be an asset for the city to look at for meeting the needs of the area in general. So we can certainly, it will always be something that councils and the community have future opportunities to look at other uses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Everyone's asked most of the questions. I do have one more question. Sorry, City Manager, just really quickly. We used to have a conversation around unhoused and homelessness as far as the city inventory of land, that we do not have much extra hanging out land. So I was just curious, has that changed since we last spoke? I don't know if that's a Greg question, a Whitney question, a Derek question.
Yeah, I'm happy to hop in. I think.
Thank you.
Mayor Stewart, I think if I understand your question correctly, the question is there any surplus land today
Correct.
Yeah, and we were required, if you're referring to, the state required us to do an inventory of our land to see if there were any suitable sites for potential sale or disposition for purposes of affordable housing. We did not identify any during that time. And the only property we've acquired since we did that inventory was the Walnut property across from the police station off of Santa Rosa, if that answers
Great.
your question.
That's absolutely perfect. Thank you. Did you have something else to add?
I was just going to add, I think Councilmember Marks raised something that I think is important, because I want the council to have the benefit of all the information. And we did our best to try to encapsulate what I think is a lot of moving pieces that I know the council has weighed seriously as it contemplates this acquisition. But I think we've met with the property owners, a number of times in Upper Monterey. I think it was back in 2015 following the adoption of the land use and circulation. And then just after COVID reopened to meet with numerous property owners. And they have brought up parking a number of times as a barrier for, potential redevelopment. How this lot plays into it, I think that's your call in the future as part of a policy discussion. And the council will have full authority, but I just want to let the council know that has been part of the conversation. I think you did hear from one of the business owners, or maybe more as part of your agenda correspondence, about the fact that has been a barrier for doing some of the redevelopment up in Upper Monterey.
Thank you. I know that was brought up in a couple bits of correspondence and didn't have the data to bring it back. It seemed as though it was more of anecdotal than anything else, so appreciate that. Councilmember Shorsman.
Yeah, I guess I would like to understand that a little bit better. I understand that many developments feel like they need parking more close by them, but I guess I would love to hear a little bit more clarification about how a lack of parking prohibits development. Maybe that's a stupid question, but just to dumb it down to the average person that's trying to figure out, well, why does that matter to somebody who's going to develop a piece of property?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. I think that, the first project that really tested no parking for residential was the lofts on the corner of Napomo and Marsh Street, the Marsh Street lofts in Commons project. And that project, there was investment in some of those lofts, and there was no on-site residential provided. And I think, from my understanding in talking with development districts downtown, is that there is the market for some level of residential downtown that doesn't have on-site parking. I think the equation shifts when you start to talk about retail, and particularly when you're looking at trying to access capital for purposes of building that ground floor retail, which in Monterey, as we think about the form and design, we're going to want to have on the ground floor so that there's interest and activity on that ground floor at the street level. And typically, a lot of bankers will want to understand, well, what is the parking inventory? I can't tell you today whether or not the street would suffice for purposes of satisfying the parking need for loaning dollars on a project. But I can tell you that it is something that comes up, even though developers may say we don't want to build it. A banker or a tenant, for that matter, might want it for purposes of just running their business. And so there's that tension. And I would just also remind the council that you do have a comprehensive item in your work program that ties to this with the Community Development Department to take a look at parking maximum, parking minimums. And so that's a future policy discussion that I think, we're going to have to get in front of and probably get some clarity on before we start to engage Upper Monterey over the next few years about the future of land use up there. And then particularly then in turn, if the council moves forward with this acquisition, how does it play into that?
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Seeing no other questions at this time, we'll move to public comment. Is there any public comment?
Yes, we have 5 public comments, all in chambers. The first one is Yi Ming Liu, then Hans Hirschberger, and Michael Massey.
Hi, Madam Mayor's.
1 minute.
Oh, sorry.
Almost there. Okay.
Madam Mayor's, council members, Derek, I just wanted to show my opposition to the acquisition of 1166 Higuera. I'm mostly concerned that there are no guardrails against the development of this property into just like a forever parking lot. You know, I do want affordable housing. I do want more density. I know Assistant City Manager McDonald said that the lack of parking is hindering densities in the areas, but I think I would disagree, and I would say that parking is hindering density. And I don't know if it's market forces that are demanding those parking spots or if it's the parking minimums. But if we do have restrictive parking minimums in downtown, we should probably get rid of them in order to increase density. We have enough parking downtown right now. We have 3 structures. We're building a 4th one, which was $40 million, 400 spaces. If you look at the staff agenda correspondence on page 2, question 4, when asked about law enforcement for this parking lot, I'll quote verbatim, as much of this area is already paid on-street parking, we don't need more cops. I think we already have enough parking within this area to accommodate the number of drivers. I'm scared that it's just going to turn into a forever parking lot. I know some of your terms will be expiring and you guys are up for election. As reasonable as you guys are, I would hate, you know, if a new council members come in, you know, this could turn into a forever parking lot, and we just don't want that. And I would just say, I would not execute the purchase of 1166 just because we don't have any guardrails for ensuring this doesn't turn into a parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hans Hirschberger, Michael Massey, and then Nathan Perez.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Hans Hirschberger, and I am here to talk to you about 1166 Higuera Street. I want for a moment for us to imagine what this lot could be, since it is zoned as retail commercial. There is the opportunity for some light residential there. As it's about a half-acre lot, this looks like something to the effect of 18 units. Since this lot also has a floor area ratio of 3, you could theoretically cover the entire property with a 3-story building. This could be affected with setbacks, but since the whole area around it is also of the same zoning, you would still be able to cover 100%. There is also a very interesting point of having a transit stop right across the street on line 1B. In the state of California, I don't know if you know this, but within a half-mile radius of any transit stop, minimum parking requirements no longer apply. So they don't apply to this property. Moreover, I was informed, I haven't confirmed this, just before this meeting, that this zone is within the downtown density bonus that you guys passed not too long ago. So we're looking at what could possibly be many more than 18 units. So that is a future that I think would be a really beneficial one, especially to your aims of increasing affordable housing and density in our downtown area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Massey, Nathan Perez, and Steve Del Martini.
Madam Mayor, council members, Derek, staff, everybody. My name is Michael Massey. I'm the president of Generation Build. We are a 70-plus member pro-housing group on the Central Coast. We would like to strongly recommend the city purchase this parcel. However, we would also like to suggest one further recommendation associated with item 6B of tonight's hearing. Upon completion of the purchase of 1166 Higuera, staff study the potential upzone of Upper Higuera and Monterey to generate more housing walkable to and from downtown. We view it as a necessity for the city to own a central parking lot or future transit center in Upper Higuera and Monterey for the upzoning to happen in a developable manner. Furthermore, we believe this area of San Luis Obispo represents the greatest portion of underdeveloped properties walkable to downtown, and will view it as a significant housing and environmental win for the acquisition to occur and serve as the future catalyst to the upzoning of the area. These types of properties are rarely available for sale. Please approve this acquisition of the parcel and recommend staff study the potential upzoning of Higuera and Monterey upon its completion. We are just an organization of 70-plus members, but we speak for thousands of people in this community that need more housing and need more development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nathan Perez, Steve Del Martini, and then Jim D'Antona.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, and Derek, I'll mostly like to echo what the previous speakers have said about considering the potential for housing on the site. Speaking on behalf of my classmate and I's club on campus at Cal Poly Urbanus, we discussed this site in our meeting today, and a lot of our discussion led to the same thing, considering it for housing, considering it for mixed-use development to bring in both sales and property tax on an otherwise largely unproductive site in terms of the general fund. And then also speaking to just the area as a public space, as a cyclist, and I speak for, I think, a lot of my classmates and a lot of the cyclists here, cycling along these roads without clear walls like buildings like the major or the center strip of Higuera, it's just a little weird. And I tend to avoid streets that are open, have these parking lots directly adjacent to it. And when I find myself on these sort of empty stretches of road, I'm the only one there. And I think keeping this as a surface parking lot beyond the completion of the fourth parking structure will really limit the patronization of businesses in the area from cyclists and people not choosing to walk along that stretch. And that concludes my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Del Martini, Jim D'Antona, and Jim D'Antona is our last speaker.
Madam Mayor and Council, Steve Del Martini. You know, when I first saw this come out on the agenda, I didn't know who was more crazy, the city to purchase it or not to purchase it, to be honest with you. And so now I'm kind of leaning to maybe you should purchase it. So, and I don't have, you know, one way or another, something's going to happen to this parcel at some time in the future. But I will say that I don't think it's the highest and best use to use it as a parking lot, but I think that somebody has to own it to then want to develop it into the future. And there's been so much conversation about what it could be and what it could be used for. I don't think 44 parking spaces is really going to change the dynamics that much of developing and expanding uptown San Luis, Monterey Street, and in those issues. If you're having a courthouse come in, or the county needs parking, or you just talked about for an hour about employees needing parking, you know, this isn't really that significant. But if you don't have it and you don't do something with it, and Mr. Tompkins doesn't do something with it, then it sits as it is with a closed down tattoo shop, okay? And so I don't know. Again, I think the highest and best use will be figured out at some point in the future. I do want to say for the average people out there, I don't do spreadsheets very well. And maybe you guys do, and I've been in, you know, real estate industry a long time, and people show them to me, and I act like I understand them, but I don't. So I would say that in staff reports, that it would be really nice. And in the real estate industry, you know, you have a multifamily project, and you have the income, you have the loan payment if you have one, you have your expenses, you have your vacancy factor, management costs. So you have an income and you have these expenses, and then there's a bottom line. It's either plus or minus. And it would be interesting in the future if you put some of those those numbers just in reality to the people that read the staff report to say, we're going to have a negative cash flow monthly on this of X. Okay, because and it just makes it easier for everybody. I don't know parentheses, red numbers, yellow numbers, blue numbers. I don't understand any of that. And I was hoping actually to come here tonight and have someone say, well, we're going to have a negative cash flow on this on a monthly basis of X. I don't know that that's going to come out or not. Anyway, you know, it's been what it is for a long time. I think that it does have a lot of potential for something in the future. And I don't know if it's sat there, or if anybody would come along and buy it and do something with it, because some other people are going to have restraints that maybe you guys aren't going to have. And so I appreciate the thought. And I came here tonight kind of like, okay, I don't think this is a great idea, but I was told a long time ago by a city council person in Santa Barbara that you can't come and change, you know, you don't change everybody's mind on a 3-minute soundbite. And I agree that that's probably correct, okay? But I think I came here tonight, I learned a lot, I listened and I understood, I read the staff report, and it kind of swung me over to being more neutral than negative. So more power to you, do what you need to do, and thank you for your time. And thank you for what you do, thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Jim D'Antona, President and CEO for the SLO Chamber of Commerce, longtime supporters of the Downtown Concept Plan. Here to talk today because really about the long-term benefit of this work and speak positively of it. I think actually your speakers today, even though they may have sounded like they're on different, we're all kind of on the same page. Back in 2021, I know City Manager Johnson talked about it. 2015, there was a conversation with the Upper Monterey business folks. We did it again in 2021. The Chamber hosted it. I know, Madam Mayor, you were there. I think some of you were on it. Yep, Councilmember Shoresman, Councilmember Pease. And we really heard about the detriment in the area of the surface lots because you couldn't take them away in order to create new development that wanted to come there. And I think one of our business friends, Kyle Weens from iFixit, sent in a comment to that because he has great ideas on how he wants to grow that area of Upper Monterey. But the key is, and I think some of these similar issues, is decoupling the parking from development. If we have the opportunity to do more parking on this site, you could then upgrade the jobs, the housing that could come here. And by taking this one surface parking lot and thinking about how it can be used better, we can do more on both sides, Higuera, Monterey, and thinking about how the new court will then impact some of those issues. All of a sudden, there's a lot of great energy that comes along that Upper Monterey area. And that added energy will help connect, you know, the downtown area to the far reaches of Monterey. So I think from all that's happening here, you should continue to move forward. Fiscally, this property will not get cheaper. That's just not going to happen. It's land in San Luis Obispo. It does not get cheaper. So now is the time to act in order to deal with that. And then hopefully we look forward to having a bigger conversation on how to really utilize this asset. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone on the Zoom?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of our speakers. And one thing I love is hearing respectful, differing opinions. And that is absolutely great. That's what we have public comment for, and all of our other forms of comment. So Council Member Francis.
Yeah, I just actually wanted to jump in here with a question. I think we saw this in a lot of our written correspondence that we got, and then I think we heard it from several different folks tonight. And I wanted to ask staff about guardrails. You know, somebody pointed out, you know, we're not all necessarily going to be here forever. And I think, you know, a lot of us have determined that this is, you know, parking is not the highest and best use, or at least we're having this conversation around whether it's the highest and best use. And if we as a council really want to ensure that that there is a focused effort around determining what that is, and moving in that direction and making sure that this property is kind of staying staying on the path that we'd like to see it stay on, which is part of the development of Upper Monterey, what are some of the guardrails that we have that we could put in place to kind of help it move in that direction?
Thank you. I'm happy to take a first stab at that. And thank you to our community development director who is looking and helping me focus on an answer to a question that came up around what are our plans essentially for the Upper Monterey area? Are we looking at upzoning or, increased kind of transit-oriented development? And we do have an item, a work plan item that's currently in our financial plan, which is to start engaging in that process that we identified in the general plan, that long paragraph at the end, subsection H, that talks about developing essentially a master plan or conceptual design for this area. So we are anticipating to conduct outreach and engagement with property owners and businesses in the Upper Monterey special focus area to look at pursuing this plan. And that is currently slated for Q4 of fiscal year 25. So that's kind of the end of our current planning or financial plan horizon, but it's at least a work plan item that is in there and scheduled to take place. That's currently what we have. That's our thought, is we're going to be engaging in the process of looking at that comprehensive plan. That is an option and certainly a really prime and important time for us to look at the use of this property kind of holistically and how it fits in with the bigger picture. That's not necessarily a guardrail. That's the beginning of a process, though, and it involves a lot of public engagement, which we want, so that we're developing a plan that the community wants and that the council at that time is also supportive of. I think it is a common challenge, I think, for bodies to look at how do you ensure and preserve something that you intend for something that really can be changed. Ultimately, it can be changed by a council. At a point, though, if you're looking at a capital investment, it's going to, if let's say we build a $50 million parking structure on it, it's not likely to be something different in the long, in our lifetimes probably. But with something like this, where our investment and our upfront costs is quite minimal to put in place a use that will be available to the public almost immediately, and then help provide that extra engagement in the area, help engage, the businesses and the people who are honestly already using that lot for some parking currently. It will allow for that and then continue to allow for that kind of thought process and looking at opportunities. The other thing I would say is if you want to give direction for us to come back at some point in time and have that discussion specific to this property, we can really do that, as directed by council. But we do have, our general plan has a policy for us to come up with this comprehensive plan. This piece of property is part of that. We know it will be up for discussion, certainly at that time, but really at any point as directed by council.
Madam Mayor, if I could hop in here and I've got some language, I think that might be helpful. If the council moves forward, if they're inclined, I've got some language that could provide a statement as part of the resolution that you could add to the resolution about how council's viewing this property, but I'll provide that language if there's consensus, that there's interest in pursuing Councilmember Francis's notion of quote unquote guardrails.
Thank you for that, City Manager. And just to kind of maybe rephrase, we can't necessarily put concrete guardrails in place, but the fact that we have a work item already in the Q4 of 25 for this specific project means that the process will theoretically unfold to determine what would happen to this property and all of the adjacent properties and imagining the future of Upper Monterey. So in some ways, there is kind of some soft guardrails in place that the process at least will occur surrounding this property. Is that a fair assessment of what we have in place?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And City Manager, did you want to share that language now, or was that?
If there's interest in the council, I'm happy to share it at the appropriate time. It would be a additional recital as part of the whereas statements in the resolution. So when you get into deliberations, I'm happy to offer that language if it pleases the mayor and council member Francis.
I think we could wait until everyone's kind of had their 2 cents and then go from there.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the comments, super thoughtful. I am supportive of purchasing the property. I would be also interested in deferring the start of payments for those 5 years. I think our parking fund has a lot going on as it is, and that would give us a little bit of wiggle room while we do the rate study. I'm super interested in the conversation about what's our intent, because I am if the Upper Monterey property owners end up developing their properties with more density because, yay, they don't have to put as much on-site parking, and they know that they'll have access to this parking, well, then it does kind of start to lock us in to having parking on that site. And when I think about the parallel to the hotels downtown and Court Street, is that's kind of what happened, right? Is that the hotels went on parking lots, and so then that was great. We then have these hotels and the 24/7 presence that we wanted, but then we needed to make up the parking for that and others, and so then we're back in that spot where we're building a parking structure because folks are depending on having parking. So it is a bit of a conundrum, which when we talked about this in a closed session, it seemed like a kind of a no-lose in that we can just use it as a parking lot for a long time, and when the timing's right, we build something on it. I think that's still the case, but I think how we talk about the intent of it is going to be really important so that people aren't necessarily dependent on it. And maybe that will just come out in that Upper Monterey process. Maybe we decide that there's some exchange. I don't know where cars are going to park for folks. So I guess the main point for tonight, though, is that I do think that we should acquire the property.
Thank you. That's a very interesting point. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, so I have struggled with this item for much longer than I struggled with last week's 6-hour meeting item, to be quite honest. I can see the really definite long-term possibilities of this piece of property. It's got a lot of potential right in the middle of our Upper Monterey section of downtown, and I hear what our public commenter said about it. Cheap land's not getting any cheaper, that's for sure. It's just going to keep escalating in value, most likely. And at the same time, when I think about the sort of the cons on the pro-con list, there's a lot, especially short term. There's, as has been mentioned, our parking team has a lot on their plates already. We just got finished purchasing a getting ready to build a $45 million parking garage, and now we're talking about another $5 million of parking capacity that we probably don't need in the short term, and is in our downtown concept plan as a parking lot. This property is identified as a parking lot. So I feel like it's going to be really hard to take that parking away and turn it into something else later, because if we develop all around it with people, just as you said, Councilmember Pease, we develop all around it to get that density that we're looking for, people are going to be looking for that parking component to stay there. And some of these other great ideas that people are asking for might be a little harder to deliver, not to mention the fact that none of us likely will be on council at that point. We talked last week with a full house about all the things that they would like us to do already with parking and the things that we need to do better with parking downtown. And our team has a lot to work on. We directed them last week to do a lot to kind of improve the user experience and look at the rates. And we've got a lot going on in that area. And so asking them to kind of put one more thing on their plate short term feels really tough to me. Also, the financing, the use of the infrastructure investment fund, it's not super clean in my mind. This is, if we're looking at this being a parking project, then maybe we should be funding it with parking money, but we don't have the money right now to do that. And I understand the idea that we could backfill the infrastructure investment fund potentially in the near term once we've used this money, but we need a lot more money in that infrastructure investment fund to do the things that we need to do already sort of in our shorter term plans than we would do something with this parking lot. So I wonder a little bit more if we're biting off more than we can chew in the short term. So I'm really torn. I talked to the city manager in advance about this idea of putting something in the resolution. That was a suggestion to me because I was concerned about, you know, sort of being blocked into this being a parking lot long-term once we make it parking and people get dependent on it and the courthouse comes in and there's going to be more momentum to continue to keep it parking. And so I ultimately, I'm not unsupportive of putting some language into the resolution, but I recognize that it really holds very little weight. It would signal to future councils that that was our intent, but they could decide to do something completely different. I guess I would say that if we do go forward, I'm not super interested. I'm willing to hear more about putting off the payments because while I understand your point behind it, it just seems like it's going to make it cost more in the long run. I don't know, maybe that's a question for staff that usually when you defer payments on something that means a larger lump sum in the end, at least that's how a mortgage works or, you know, other types of loans work.
And we could do defer payment or like full payment. You could do defer payment but not interest. You could, I mean, there's like 3 different options of how we could do that with deferring. So there's just some options.
Yeah, so I guess I'm curious about those, but I'm sort of leaning against this at the moment, but I have been looking for the last 2 weeks about how I could get to yes on this. So happy to hear what others have to say or what these other things might be. I do think that if it's going to be parking in the short term, that it makes sense to have the parking fund be the main payer of this.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Well, I think that this is an opportunity that doesn't come along very often, and I think I do support purchasing it. It's an investment in the future of the downtown or the uptown, whatever you want to call it. I think it's really a remarkable opportunity. I would be in favor of having a 5-year deferral of the principal payment and have a pay-as-you-go on the interest rate so that it doesn't double up and accrue. It doesn't become a huge amount in the future. I think that to me, this is a kind of the best thing we could possibly do to actually acquire the property. And I mean, one of our public comment folks described it as like, you know, it's an empty parking lot with a closed tattoo parlor. Yes, it is. And it's just been sitting there not doing anything. This would be a way of actually activating it and putting it to a public purpose. I think it'd be good. I also think just doing the striping, having the kiosk there, the pay kiosks, I don't think it would take much work for our transit folks. I think that once it got set up, it would just kind of run itself. The question of people becoming dependent on having that parking there is something that I think is kind of intangible. You know, what has happened in the past with the surface parking is that there was a policy in the downtown concept plan, which is not an adopted specific plan, it's a concept plan, that we were going to take the surface parking lots and turn them into something else and build parking garages around the periphery of the city, and that's what we've been doing. And what happened is that people came forward with ideas for utilizing those surface parking lots for something else. They have all kinds of names: Garden Street Terraces, Chinatown. I mean, it went on and on and on. But this is one of the reasons I feel that this is an investment in the future. If someone came to the city after we'd used it for parking for a while and had an amazing idea for possibly affordable housing or something else, something that we don't even know of right now, or if SLOCOG and RTA said, hey, we want to try to do that transit center and let's try to do it again, we would have a tremendous amount of power in the negotiations if we own the property. So I think it would be a good investment, and that's my thought so far in the deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a question that I forgot to ask earlier. So I drove by today, for example, and it was almost full. So who rents out this space? The current owner of the property, or do people just randomly park there and waiting to get in trouble, or how does that work?
It's my understanding that the current property owner has essentially a relationship or agreement with another local business for their employees to be able to use that parking lot.
Got it. Thank you. I assumed that's how it was, but I just wanted to make sure. I have so many things about this decision, and I very much appreciate the very long-standing policy around parking, paying parking, and I hear that. And also, as we discussed last weekend, we've also found these strange little caveats that have happened through the years. One of the things I think about when I just step back for a second and step away from the parking is it's a piece of land that we have a chance to purchase. And not only does land not get any cheaper, it doesn't pop out of nowhere. And so when I think about this, that was my first initial thought, similar to Walnut was, we should grab it now. But how do we do that, and do we have the money for it, was, of course, a question. And I don't know who said it at one point, but I know I had a similar question to city attorney around if this gets sold later and parking fund hasn't paid off at all, how does this work? And the reality is, you know, we've had some different funds that are paying for it, whether it's deferred or whether it's not, that it all just has to be in the resolution when it's, you know, coming back to the council for the surplus land to then go on and move forward. So while it's complicated on a city realm and bureaucracy realm, that's what we hire these wonderful people to do. But it's definitely something we can still sell. So I look at that as, even if nothing else, this was a purchase now and it's parking now, so it's staying parking. There's no difference really, other than we might make well, no, we won't make any revenue, but we won't lose a lot of revenue on it. It to me is first and foremost land that we own, that we then have some power over what happens with it next, as you mentioned, Vice Mayor. And I hate the word power, and it sounds very awkward, but negotiating power is a real thing. So that's the first and foremost, is just the land. The fact that I would love to see this as a transit center or housing in the future. Absolutely, there's no question. There's not, I don't dream for a 44-spot parking lot forever. That has never been like, yes, I wish that would happen. As mentioned in the agenda correspondence, I appreciate the amount of work that's on parking staff, and all of our staff is a lot. And they're already down there. So it's not, and right now, if I remember correctly, they're down there collecting coins still, which is more time consuming than the parking kiosks. So at some point in time, I assume that will change, but that's a whole nother day's conversation. So I think that our staff can handle that. And at the same time, maybe we do have to hire one more person. I don't know what that looks like, and I'll continue to leave that to staff to bring back to us at another date. I think there's an aspect that I agree, it's hard to take away parking. And I have not been here for 64 years like some people have, or generations, but I have been here for 30 years. And I was here when the Court Street was a parking lot. I was here when the place across from Big Sky Hotel Cerro was a parking lot. I was here when just recently next to Mission was a parking lot, and now it's going to become a parking structure. We can change things, and not just we, but whoever is in the future. And, you know, I hope for those autonomous self-driving cars or hover cars or whatever's going to be in the future, that we don't have to do any of that as far as making more parking. But we're also not there yet. And so I really don't mean that as flippant as that may sound. I really mean it like we don't know what's going to happen. And I don't think we could have ever imagined where we're at today with technology, let alone where we're going to be in 30 years, so, or 10 years, or however many years. So I do think that I hear the concern. I don't want it to be a parking lot forever. So I like the potential future conversation with city managers, additional recital around what could that look like. So we do have some sort of soft guardrails of not having it be parking forever. But again, if this means that we have high density and we're able to make this parking lot helps us have more housing in the future, then great. I think that with the court in the future, the courthouse in the future, it is going to be interesting to see where does everyone park, and if that was to go away, what would that look like? Is it so valuable that maybe they wish to invest a little bit more in the future? Who knows? But I remember when I worked there almost 20 years ago. No, it was 20 years ago. Wow. That I had a Prox pass into the only Palm Street parking garage that was there. So I just think that they are aware of their employees, and whether it's through the bargaining units or however it happens, they're going to make sure their employees have a place to be. In addition, there are many people that come to the courthouse every single day, Monday through Friday, for all their different reasons, some positive, some not, and they need to shop and eat and do the things they need to do on their breaks, and I think that gives us another opportunity with this parking lot. I do think that the minimum maximum conversation later with the work plan, from Timmy Tway will be very interesting. I think those parking minimums and maximums will actually be important to know, just like the rate fee structure, rate fee study, before we make a decision about where that parking lot will go in the future. So that's just my 2 cents on that. I like the idea of the deferral of payment, because we have a lot going on with the parking fund right now that we're trying to help our small businesses and our local businesses succeed. So it's hard to do that and then say, and now pay, but I do like the idea of paying interest. I think of it similar to my very high, unfortunate, small, school loans. I still pay the interest in between, and that's how it goes, but it gets deferred a little bit longer, and I get to pay a little bit longer. So I think the last thing was, sorry, I'm just tried to keep track of all of my notes. Oh, and just the lack of public parking having to do with developers. I have little by little been talking to people and asking this question, because it really has seemed anecdotal. And so it's hard to make decisions on data. We say we want to make decisions on data, but yet that's all anecdotal. So I think that's hard, is how are we going to put that into a staff report in the future, or decision-making in the future, as far as why someone wouldn't develop on that end of town because of parking. I don't know a good answer for that, but I think that's important to have some more conversation on. on the staff level to be able to give us that information for the future. Sorry for the very long input, but thank you for listening. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you. This was a real doozy for me too. This was one that I feel like I've had a constant struggle with all week. Very much concerned with this short-term focus on expansion of parking, particularly in an area where it's not necessary. And looking at the link there in the downtown concept plan, it is earmarked to continue to be parking into the future. But I also really appreciate a lot of the correspondence and conversations that I've had with folks who are involved in the downtown concept plan and who envision maybe a better future for it, a more interesting future for that particular lot. And to kind of circle back to one of our commenters earlier, we are going to have a negative cash flow on this property. And that was another big sticking point for me, because almost all the language in here is focused on its future being a parking lot. And we're looking at that revenue being a piece of funding it. The fact that it's cash flow negative, gives me a huge amount of pause. And with that, taking that into consideration, the discussion that's happening up here around the deferral of payments, that also makes me really nervous. We don't know where our parking fund's going to be in 3 or 5 years or what the future is going to hold. And so pushing off payments so that we suddenly have this huge chunk that we have to pay off really saddles future councils down the road with having to take up this obligation that we're taking on now. And that feels a little irresponsible for the future councils to have to deal with the decisions that we're making right now. When I was on Planning Commission, I was really excited to see, the Upper Monterey project, the Upper Monterey concept plan coming through, and we got to approve the 100 units of low-income, high-density housing there on Monterey, and really thinking about how that was going to be part of a future reimagining of that area was really exciting to me. And so flipping this whole thing around and thinking about how if the city has control of this property, it really gives us a lot more freedom to determine what that higher and best use of the property is. That feels like an opportunity we can't let pass us by. I was talking to City Manager Johnson, who mentioned that it's been 20 years since a property like this has come available, and we're sitting on this moment, this opportunity, and to say timing's not great, that also is a really challenging position to be in, because we don't want to let this opportunity to do something for the future pass us by there too. So I guess all of that to say that I think we have some discussions to have about kind of the nature of what this deal would be. I would really be interested in hearing some of the guardrail language that you were talking about potentially having. To me, that's a really important part of whether or not I support this project. I want it to go to a higher and best use, and that could be any number of things. It might be that we surround it with all sorts of cool high-density infill, and it does end up having to, in the short term, be some sort of parking overflow. And then we determine that through a process where that's the highest and best use. Hopefully that's not it. Transit, high density infill housing, affordable housing, that really needs to be our focus in the city. And so I'm hoping that that's the outcome of whatever process we go through in Q4 of 2025. But I guess that's to be determined by the whole community coming together and making those decisions. So I will leave it there for now, because it sounds like we have some stuff to hash out as a group, but thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schwarzman, are you okay with hearing the input from City Manager first? Okay. City Manager, do you mind sharing your text that you were considering?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And so just to try to put a point, I'm hearing consensus, at least amongst three of you, at least that in the basics, that we want to move forward with acquisition of the property. So if we could stipulate that that's at least the direction we're going to go now, we're working in to try to modify the resolution. And so based upon Councilmember Francis's comments and the other comments, I would suggest, and I would refer to the council members, and perhaps Ms. McDonald, I don't know, or the city clerk can put the resolution up on the screen for the council members. I don't know, Mr. Herman, if you can get access to that so they can follow it, but as they try to do that, I can read. It would add a recital stating, whereas the city intends that the acquisition is for the purpose of orderly planning the Upper Monterey area, consistent with general plan policies and future uses, parentheses, e.g., affordable housing, transit center, parking, or other public benefit community serving uses for this property shall be determined through a comprehensive community planning process for Upper Monterey. And so the intent of that is really to just put, as Councilmember Francis mentioned, some intent in terms of the guardrails about how the city is going to approach determining that highest best use. So I don't know, Mr. Herman, if whether or not we were able to put that on the screen for viewing by the council members.
Not quite yet.
Okay. But I don't know, Councilmember Francis, if that
Here it is.
Yeah, the essence of what you were trying to get at.
Councilmember Francis, did you have?
Just go into the alternative resolution, or is it supposed to have additional language? Okay.
Yeah, so we would propose you insert this in your recitals. And then, so if there's consensus that we're moving forward with the acquisition, and then I think it'd be helpful, is there support for this proposed additional recital? And then if there's further changes to the resolution that, regarding the deferment of fees, we've got language for the council if it would please the council.
Can I?
Thank you, City Manager. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, so to go back to the sort of guardrail intent of this, what, other than expressing our current priorities at the time, now, and in the next few years, while several of us are still here, what does this do for us? Does this have any kind of teeth, or is it just kind of language?
City Attorney, did you have a?
It's a statement of intent. It certainly conveys this council's desires going forward, sort of requests for consideration. But in terms of binding a future council or inhibiting their ability to make a different set of choices as a majority body, it doesn't. I don't want to create any false expectations around that language.
So maybe my next question, my next point is a moot point of sort of massaging this language. I wonder if sort of these examples are just listed as examples. Is there any value to prioritizing them? Affordable housing, then transit, then parking, then other public benefit, in a way that, I don't know. Just asking, I guess, for the sake of discussion.
That's a good question. I don't know that it matters, and priorities is kind of just like a list. If we said 1, 2, 3, that would be an identifier, I think, but not that my.
Since it doesn't really have, it's just signaling intent.
Yeah.
So around the one item in our work plan already around looking at parking minimums, that I think Councilmember Francis was referring to, and in how it might impact the use of this particular space and this particular project. What would be the timeline for working on something like that? I guess I'm looking for, is there a way that we can sort of have some more say in what happens to the lot? More than just a whereas statement that doesn't have any teeth.
So certainly the intent and the requirement in our current financial plan and work plan that calls for us to start the process of engaging in the development of that Upper Monterey master plan or comprehensive plan, that gives you something. It's already in our current financial plan. And we do have an intent to carry that out. So that's at least the first step and our current timeline. But again, if council wants to provide direction on doing that a little differently, we can definitely take direction, I think, and it would be easy to do to make sure that the future uses of this specific property are called out and addressed directly during that process. So this is really an important conversation for staff to hear and understand, that if we move forward with this purchase, that process that is currently kind of, you know, starting the engagement around creating a plan for this area can sound kind of vague, but we know that a piece of that is going to be identification of future long-term uses of this particular property and maybe even interim uses. So I think that would be, at least, you know, from my standpoint right now, a really easy direction that we could commit to and carry out, to the extent that there's more that you want to include in this and provide assurances on. We might need to make some other adjustments on our work planning if we're going to kind of pump, you know, if this is going to bump up in priorities. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my concern. Everything's trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis. Sorry.
Councilmember Shoresman, if I may, I think the item that you mentioned as looking at the parking minimums and maximums, I think that the work plan item I was pointing to is the one that was specific to looking at the Upper Monterey, like, holistic development in Q4 of 25. So it would be a broader sort of examination of all of the uses in the area, not just about parking. And I was actually wondering, in the language that was presented by City Manager Johnson, if there was any sort of use in pointing towards that item. Specifically, and I know it says as part of a comprehensive plan in there at the end already, but pointing to the fact that it is a work item slated for Q4 of 25, and we will be looking at these particular uses in it. And maybe, again, we're just getting like too caught up in language that doesn't mean anything here. It doesn't have to say Q4, just in the work plan. But I'm seeing you get nervous about timing and us pushing that. But wondering if there's any value to pointing to the thing that already exists where we're supposed to look at this particular issue.
I hate to throw this out there, but we also don't ever know if there's, unfortunately, like the storms that happen in January. So I hear work plan, but Q4 makes me,
yeah,
do we have
get
to
rid of the
identify
Q4,
that?
get rid
okay.
of, just say that the work plan item to look at Upper Monterey.
Perfect. Sorry, City Manager, I cut you off.
No, my apologies. I think, yeah, thank you for that clarification. I think that's fine. I appreciate that we know that the future has a lot of variables in front of us, and we will be back to the council as part of mid-year to recalibrate our work program, period. So I don't think you need to do that tonight or get into the date. We'll have a better sense, you know, in talking with community development and the rest of the team after we clear some, you know, immediate hurdles, when we have better certainty, when we can bring that forward. And I will tell you, having been in the planning business for 20 years, you want to give as much time as necessary to get a good plan. So I think Q4, whenever we get that, is the beginning of the process, not the end. So, because, you know, if there's anything that I've learned is that getting the right people in the right room and getting the right amount of input is going to get the best plan in front of the council to make sure you can make the best decisions.
Understood. And to be clear, none of this is meant to rush the process or to jump over anything that's already in line in front of it. Just trying to make sure that, because we are talking about in the future, at least a couple years out, I think the concern is that, you know, memories are short, and making sure that we obviously can't have guardrails, but we have really clear expectations of what we'd love to see. And I know that's maybe not satisfying to members of the public here who would love to see this already designated for something in particular, but I know that there's a process to do that, and it's a really important process to engage the entire community and to really look at how this fits into the larger puzzle. So I respect all of that. Just wanting to make sure that we do what we can here to make our intent clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Marks.
Oh, thank you. Well, I agree with this, this idea of putting, you know, a statement of intent. I mean, it's always important when you analyze anything. When you look at the, look at any sort of, from a legal point of view, you're always looking at what is the legislative intent. And so stating it, I think, is really important. I also want to just say that we're if we buy this property, if we vote to do that, we're really creating opportunity for the city, but also for, I mean, the city as an entity, but also for the larger community, because people will start having ideas about, well, what should happen with this property? And they will often come forward as much as the city saying, you know, this is what we want to do. Possibly there may be some amazing ideas out there that we don't even know about. So I don't want to try to tie a future council down. I think this language is good. I just spotted one little typo. It's benefit, not benefic. So yeah, that's all. So at some point, I would like to make a motion that we approve the staff recommendation with the added language, and I'm going to say 5-year deferral of principal payments and interest being paid as you go by the parking fund. And I think that's it.
Thank you. There's a couple other comments. Are you actually motioning that now that we need to second and vote it up or down and then have more conversation?
I think I would like to make it as a motion so that we can talk about the whole 5-year thing.
Okay.
In a focused way.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion? Councilmember Pease.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Looks like there's some discussion. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, I'm just going to say thank Councilmember Francis for the clarification on the work plan item, because I was not understanding what you were talking about. So that's much clearer now. And also appreciate the, the addition of the clarification and giving the community a more of a clear point in time as to when we would be discussing this in a lot more detail, because I think it's been nebulous and we have this downtown concept plan, but knowing that we're going to refine that and there's going to be lots of opportunity in the somewhat near term is important to clarify. So I appreciate that addition to the resolution. And yeah, the 5-year deferment, again, I'm not super excited about deferring payments for all of the reasons that Councilmember Francis mentioned. I have just not ever felt comfortable financing things in that way in my own personal life, and wouldn't recommend it for a government agency either. So I would just say, let's keep it simple. It's not really going to impact the way that we are operating now going forward, and with the rate study plan, staff has laid out an outline of where we're at and have planned out the CIP accordingly. And so I'd rather just stick with the plan as proposed by staff. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If the support is there to look at the deferral of the principal payments, staff has some additional language that we would propose including in the resolution. It's not only just the kind of basic language around deferring the principal payments, but paying the interest that's accrued during that time frame. But we've also drafted some findings to help just clarify for our record the use of the essentially the general fund for the purchase of the property and what will happen during that 5-year principal payment deferral period. So we have been able to put the proposed language up on the screen. This does also include, if we end up scrolling up, that purpose statement as well. So that you can see what we are contemplating to accomplish what's being discussed right now, if that's the actual action taken. Sure thing.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Councilmember Francis?
With this language, how would the payment structure work after the 5 years? Would there be a balloon payment, or would it just be rolled into the other payments as amortized out?
That was my question as well.
Yeah.
Honestly, the way that it's written, it maintains the 30-year period. So I think it doesn't specify how we would go about making it all kind of true up.
That makes me nervous.
We probably would even it out over the course of the remaining 25 years. Right. But
Can I hop in for a second? Here's my recommendation, Madam Mayor, is that you essentially you're having a 30-year period that starts 5 years from now. I think that's the cleanest way to do it, rather than have catch-up payments or deferred interest. I think that's the cleanest way to do it. So you're essentially just saying that the payments don't start for 5 years.
So a 35-year period with no payments on principal or interest in the first 5 years, but would interest accrue during the first 5 years?
No, I think, because, and here's what I would and that's my recommendation. And here's why. I think that you saw the forecast earlier with the purchase, and then and the council's already made some decisions about 1 hour. And I get concerned that these, start to accumulate, and you have, a lot of things happening at once. And so if you're going to do it, you just essentially defer the payment out for both principal and interest, and that the payments don't start for 5 years.
And this doesn't change any of the previous discussion around the infrastructure fund and the need for those funds in the near and long term?
No, because and thank you for that question. It's a good question. I think that the answer is we'll recommend at mid-year to restore this funding back to the Infrastructure Investment Fund. We have not put into the general fund any sort of loan and then payment. So that would be additional funds that we would incorporate into your revised 5-year forecast that the council will take a look at in June of 2024 as part of the supplemental budget.
And is there any precedent for this kind of funding structure in our city history?
We've done loans before, and we've had to be creative. The most recent analogous example is we had to lend some park funds for the Margarita area for purposes of building the Prado Road for Cerro Meadows. And so we've had to do this kind of financing. The foundation for this kind of thinking, really is embodied in some of your specific plans. both Margarita and Orcutt, where we have to do these kind of loans in order to advance, pieces of infrastructure. So that's the most analogous example. Back in my redevelopment days, this kind of stuff we did this stuff all the time.
And this doesn't in any way kind of, violate the sanctity of the parking fund. I guess I'm worried about the slippery slope argument sort of slipping in here, that we're doing this funny, funding mechanism here. And so therefore the parking fund doesn't exist as a special fund.
I think that's the intent of these statements, these whereas statements, to be very clear that it's for an explicit purpose. So I think staff did a good job, an excellent job of trying to embody those clear lines, and then really drawing out that there's extenuating circumstances here.
Okay, thank you for answering all those questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Shorsman.
Yeah, so I guess maybe, I'm sorry to belabor this, but it seems like we're not even talking about the Infrastructure Investment Fund anymore. Now it's switched to the general fund the way the language is here. Am I missing something?
Councilmember Shorsman, I think to be clear is that the Infrastructure Investment Fund is a name. It's not a fund, and I don't know if
it's just
Dr. Jackson is there, but it's part of the general fund. It's a colloquial term to really talk about how the fund was to be used consistent with the resolution, but it's part of the general fund per se.
It's like a line item, basically, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's not like an enterprise fund or a that we have, or any sort of proprietary funds. It's overall part of the general fund.
Right, but the parking fund is not. The parking fund is separate.
Correct. Yeah, that is
yes.
That's a business fund, just like water and sewer and transit, et cetera.
So again, forgive me if this is going backwards in the discussion, but this allows us to not impact the parking fund by utilizing general fund in order to make the purchase, and then the parking fund will still pay the general fund, aka Infrastructure Investment Fund. Okay, I have the same concerns. This sounds just really mucky and confusing and not very transparent.
Can I add just one thing? I think, because I think that will be confusing for people. Could we do it in parentheses with the general fund next to it, the Infrastructure Investment Fund? Because it says clearly the interfund loan. So it's clearly that one fund is loaning to another fund, but because we've been talking about the Infrastructure Investment Fund throughout the entire resolution and throughout the entire staff report, I think that may cause confusion. And so even though we understand it's a line item, it just has this name that is labeled as Infrastructure Investment Fund, that could make it maybe a little bit smoother.
I think that the part that I'm honestly not certain on is, so the intent here is to use the money in the Infrastructure Investment Fund, which is sort of an account in the general fund, to make the purchase. And then through the mid-year process, replenish the Infrastructure Investment Fund with general fund money, so into that account. When this repayment starts, we would be paying the general fund back, because the larger account rather than the specific account, the Infrastructure Investment Fund, because then you'll see these kind of, what might be kind of random $237,000 a year going into the Infrastructure Investment Fund that is otherwise, say, $12.5 million. So it's just a matter, that's, I think, part of why it looks this way in the resolution is we're using this account to pay the lump sum to purchase the property, and we intend to replenish it. And so when the repayments start, we want to replenish where that money ultimately comes from. Does that help?
Go for it. Yeah, I'm still confused, to tell you the truth.
Hold on one second.
again, just to be super clear, I thought earlier when we were clarifying that we were essentially backfilling the infrastructure investment fund and that we would additionally then be paying in more, so almost like putting in more money over time into the infrastructure investment fund. And now I'm feeling like we're saying not that.
No, you're correct, Councilmember Francis. That the
Okay.
idea is at mid-year, we would replenish it so we have the cash for purposes of funding the CIP projects that for the original intended uses, whether it's the Prado Road Bridge or the Prado Road Overpass. And then the general fund, i.e., and I think it's perfectly acceptable, Madam Mayor, if you want to put in next to general fund, infrastructure intended for the infrastructure investment fund, to have that in there because that was the intent.
So we're really doubling down on the amount of money that we're putting into infrastructure investment because we need that additional money, which was what your line of questioning was earlier, that we didn't have sufficient funds in there.
Correct.
So we will be bringing in general funds, but we'll also be paying on that particular fund, and all of that will go to the infrastructure investment fund. And I'm so sorry to all of the members of the public who are sitting through this, but it feels like we need to be super clear on where the money's going and where it's coming from.
I think, Ms. Jackson, you might be sharing that.
Yeah, I think the way to think about it is that the infrastructure investment fund is loaning the parking fund this lump sum amount so that it can make this one-time purchase. The general fund, our thought is the general fund at mid-year, we would recommend using any unassigned or a portion of the unassigned general fund balance to expedite reimbursement of the funding that is currently in the infrastructure investment fund. So it's moving general fund dollars still within the general fund, but specifically to the infrastructure investment fund so that we don't have to delay completion of the projects that are currently planned to be funded out of the infrastructure investment fund. And then the debt service paid back by the parking fund after a period of 5 years, it sounds like, would reimburse the general fund for having paid back the infrastructure investment fund.
So the interest would go back to the general fund rather than to the infrastructure investment fund?
Correct.
So we would not be adding additional money to the infrastructure investment fund via the interest rate. The interest would go back to the general fund rather than the subset that is the infrastructure investment fund.
That is my current understanding. I mean, I guess we could look at doing it the other way, but ultimately, City Manager Johnson is correct. The infrastructure investment fund is part of the general fund, so it's general fund money either way.
Okay, so it sounds like it got confusing because we added different terminology into the language. We added general fund instead of infrastructure investment fund, which is what the staff report and everything else before was referring to. And we're talking about in here, the language proposed deferring any payments for 5 years. Just to kind of let my colleagues know where I'm at, I've come around to taking a leap of faith to supporting the general concept of purchasing this piece of property, but I am still not super happy about the way that this deferral is happening. I just don't think that's a good idea. I think it saddles our future councils, and we already have potential things that we're working on with parking rates. And just don't want to complicate things. It just seems like it's a bad idea for the future.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of surprised that we're talking about having no payments at all for the first 5 years, because that wasn't my understanding when I read the staff report and when I made the motion. So now I'm going to withdraw my motion, if it's okay with the second. And I'd like to make another motion, which is to approve the purchase, the staff recommendation without any deferral at all, so that it would start immediately.
Councilmember Francis
So that it's
was the
clear and
second. Do you want
it's
to?
much more straightforward, and we're not having to, I think it's gotten way too complicated. The idea of deferring any payment at all for 30 years, for 5 years, I don't think that just doesn't feel right to me. I think the parking fund should start payment just like regular payments, just like the original staff report.
Can I propose a intermediate solution?
Sure.
And here's why. It's not that the parking fund was looking to build more parking in Upper Monterey, and we're trying to, we've been on the hunt for a spot. We have all agreed that the main reason we're getting this is as an investment in the orderly development of Upper Monterey. And we're kind of using the parking fund as a way to be able to take control of that parcel and get a little bit income and support some businesses in the intermediate time, right? So that's the justification in my mind for the deferral, because this is not the perfect timing for the parking fund. With that being said, I would be comfortable with a 3-year deferral, but continue with interest payments, just so that we can get the parking structure built, right? So that we have that source of income coming in before, because we already are recognizing that this is net zero. If this were only about parking, I don't think that I'd be supporting the purchase at all, right?
Right.
We're trying to gain control of a really important piece of property.
So Councilmember Pease, you're saying 3-year deferral on the principal, but they start paying the interest now?
Yes.
That would be, that's a good friendly amendment as far as I'm concerned. Plus the whereas
yes,
the
with
city
that whereas
intends
language.
the language as to the intent.
And changing public.
So
to-
it's been, so
Wait.
that's my movement. It's been seconded, right?
Are we saying public beneficial or public benefit? It was benefit
Public
before, that's why. I just
Beneficial
defined it.
community serving uses.
Community serving services, serving uses.
We say public benefit in our other things, that's why I just asked. Councilmember Shorsman, sorry.
It's supposed to change to public benefit, I think, is what you're trying to find. I just wanted to have somebody repeat what the new proposed changes.
Could the city clerk read back the motion, please?
Sorry, that's funny.
Okay, so I'm going to try to repeat it.
Can we do a 5-minute break so that staff can get together and make all the,
Okay. Well, as long
arrangements
as
that need
the
to?
city clerk has got the motion, which is basically the staff recommendation with the added public benefit intention language, 3-year deferral on the payment of the principal and interest starting immediately. Is that correct? Andy, please.
Yes.
It's moved and seconded.
Okay.
But we're not going to vote on it till after the
Right.
final.
So Councilmember Francis, are you still seconding it? Okay, that was Councilmember Pease. Sorry, thank you very much. Okay, so Councilmember Shorsman.
This isn't a great compromise in my opinion. I feel like this is going to be parking for the foreseeable future, even while I agree it's worth planning, and we're going to be planning pretty in the near term for what it might be instead. It's going to be parking for the foreseeable future, and I think that the parking fund should start paying right away for it. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
I agree with the sentiments expressed by Councilmember Shorsman, though I do hear and understand the arguments being made around the intent of the purchase, and that none of us would be excited about this if it were purely for parking. And I also hear what you're saying about getting the parking garage built. I think I would be willing to move ahead with this as amended, but I would prefer if we were just paying right away.
Yeah, I really believe that as Councilmember Pease mentioned, we wouldn't typically come up to a person who's completely stretched and say, all right, you have no money left, but here's the deal. I'm gonna suggest this really great plan, and it's gonna help you in the long run, and you're gonna pay for it now, even though you have no money. Like that, it just doesn't make sense to me. So to me, it makes sense that we defer until the POM structure is done, because there needs to be a little bit of room in the parking fund. That was my thought. I think I appreciate the interest starting immediately, because that to me is a good compromise. And not that anyone was coming to us from the parking fund, but because there's not a person, but I really think that the parking fund staff wouldn't have suggested this as an idea. So I just feel like we're the ones saying, this is a great opportunity, let's do it. So that's my 2 cents. I am okay with the 3-year principal payment and the interest starting immediately. So if no other questions or last thoughts, all right, roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes. Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but yes.
And
Mayor
yeah,
Stewart?
yes, and I am shocked that this is passing 5-0. Thank you to my colleagues and to staff for all the last-minute changes. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Moving on to the next item. 6C is we're introducing an ordinance to allow limited access to public parking lots. Parking, we just can't be done. Sorry.
Well, let's talk about parking.
After hours for charging electric vehicles only. Mr. Horn.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I too am very scared to present this item to you tonight, our 3rd parking item in a row, but we're hoping Mr. Brendan Pringle's done such a great job with this item. He's our brand new Public Works senior business analyst, and so he recently took that role. One of his items was to do this ordinance. It's really kind of a cleanup ordinance to kind of align with our climate action plan and our current parks use hours. And so Brendan's here to cover the ordinance revision. We have Mr. Chris Reed in the background who can help us with some of the RFP or purchasing information. But with that, I'll hand it off to Brendan.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Brendan Pringle, and I am the Senior Business Analyst for Public Works. The item we have before you tonight is the introduction of an ordinance amending Chapter 12.20 of the Municipal Code, allowing for limited after-hours charging of electric vehicles in public parking lots. In my presentation this evening, I'll outline why the ordinance is needed, some of the key features, including what it does not change, and how it will be enforced. And before I continue, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the rest of the team that has been heavily involved in the efforts behind this item, including the Mobility Services Division, the Office of Sustainability and Natural Resources, the City Attorney's Office, the Parks and Rec Director, the Public Works Director, and the Police Department. So without further ado, the recommendation tonight is to introduce an ordinance amending Title 12, Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places of the Municipal Code to allow limited after-hours charging of electric vehicles in public park parking lots. To start things off with some of the policy context leading up to this, Major City Goal Strategy 4.3 notes that the city will focus on enabling and deploying publicly accessible electric vehicle charging infrastructure for those that need to drive. The San Luis Obispo Access and Parking Management Plan echoes this with a call to expand off-street EV charging for vehicles. And then the Climate Action Plan work program specifically calls for the installation of publicly accessible chargers on public property. With this in mind, the city's Office of Sustainability and Natural Resources is quickly advancing the installation of DCFC fast charging EV charging stations at both Santa Rosa Park and Johnson Park, as well as other non-park locations. These charging stations are expected to come online between May and July of 2024 and will fully charge most EVs in 2 hours or less. So why is an ordinance needed? Currently, the city municipal code prohibits anyone from entering, remaining, or staying in any public park between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. without director approval, making it otherwise illegal for someone to charge their electric vehicles after hours once those charging stations are in place. And so this proposed ordinance would provide the limited exception necessary for around-the-clock access to the charging stations. So some of the features of the ordinance: it provides limited exception to this prohibition for EV drivers and passengers only. It limits access to a maximum of 2 consecutive hours. Every vehicle charges a bit differently, but it shouldn't take more than 2 hours for a vehicle to fully charge on one of these stations. And then lastly, it only provides this exception to those who are actively charging their vehicles. Nothing else in the municipal code would be affected by this proposed ordinance. Overnight camping is prohibited in city parks, as noted in the municipal code, and this prohibition would not be affected by this ordinance. And then the proposed ordinance would continue to prohibit usage of any other park amenities after hours, including the benches, playground equipment, barbecues, and tables. Drivers and passengers are only allowed to be in the parking lot going to and from the charger. So how will this ordinance be enforced? Fortunately, it'll be very clear to police officers on duty who is actively charging their car and who isn't. When the charger is actively charging a vehicle, the charger will light up blue, as you can see in the photo. It'll light up blue at the top, and then when it's not charging a vehicle, the light will remain green. This will make it really easy for our officers to recognize who is actually charging the vehicle and then who is pretending to charge a vehicle. So in conclusion, the recommendation before you is to introduce an ordinance amending Title 12, Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places in the Municipal Code to allow limited after-hours charging of electric vehicles in public parking lots. And with that, we can open up for questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, just wanted to say welcome. We're so excited to have you as part of the team. Great job, Brendan.
Thank you.
Just had a really quick question. I'm really excited about this and about the install of the chargers in Santa Rosa Park and Johnson Park, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many we're getting in this first round of install?
How many
Charging
chargers?
stations? Yeah,
It'll be 4 in each.
4 in each. Awesome. And that was it for my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions from my colleagues? Vice Mayor.
And these chargers would be kind of generic, all use, not just Tesla, right?
Right. Do you want to address that?
They're either non-Tesla or it's just like the kind of like generic charger.
Correct. The charging infrastructure will have universal accessibility for Teslas and non-Teslas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, great presentation, very clear. And any public comment?
No, they're not.
Wonderful. Well, I just wanted to say thank you also, and I'm sure this maybe up to the vendor, but the text versus just the color in the wording of in use versus available. There are some people who are colorblind and cannot see the difference. So, Councilmember Francis.
I would like to move to approve the recommendation.
Awesome. Councilmember Shorsman.
Easiest second I've ever made.
So true. I am very in favor of this and really excited. Sorry you had to wait for such a long time, but thank you. Can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Francis.
Yes.
Councilmember Schwarzman.
Yes.
Councilmember Pease.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks.
Yes.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
And I'm very excited about this as well. Okay. Well, thank you very much to the team. We have one last topic, and it is adopting an amended and restated resolution to confirm the city's participation in the statewide community infrastructure program. And I believe that Rebecca Bernstorff is doing the whole presentation. Awesome.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Rebecca Bernstorff, and I'm the Business Services and Administrative Manager for the Community Services Group. Tonight's presentation includes the background of the city's status in the statewide Community Infrastructure Program, also known as SCIP. So forgive all the acronyms. This is a really heavy acronym presentation. Since it was before you in 2018, the SCIP process and benefits to the property owners and concludes with an outline of the resolution and the proposed changes. The item before you tonight is a recommendation to adopt an amended and restated resolution to confirm the city's participation in the SCIP. Additionally, this resolution restates the authorization of the California Statewide Communities Development Authority, also known as CSCDA, to accept applications from property owners, conduct special assessment proceedings, and levy assessments and special taxes, and to form assessment districts and community facility districts within the territory of the city, embodying a joint community facilities agreement, setting forth the terms and conditions of CFD's financings, and approve forms of acquisition agreement for use when applicable in related actions. The CSCDA is a joint powers authority sponsored by the League of California Cities and the California State Association of Counties. 530 counties, cities, and special districts throughout California are members of CSCDA, including the city of SLO. SCIP was instituted by CSCDA in 2002 to allow owners of property in participating cities and counties to finance the development of impact fees that would be payable by property owners upon receiving development entitlements or building permits through pooled special assessment districts programs. SCIP was expanded to include financing of public capital improvements directly, in addition to fees, and has now been further expanded to include community facilities districts, also known as CFDs. As provided for in the proposed amended and restated resolution. CFDs, also known as Mello-Roos districts, are a type of special tax district formed when property owners within a geographic area agree to impose a tax on property in order to fund infrastructure improvements or services. Since its inception, SCIP has issued over $1 billion in land-secured special assessments and CFD bonds for development projects in California. The city initially joined SCIP in November of 2018, and it is currently anticipated that at least 2 projects, the East and West Airport annexations, will utilize SCIP funding as a part of its financing plan. In addition, the city has had discussions and received inquiries from several other potential development projects that could significantly benefit from the use of SCIP funding. If a property owner chooses to participate in SCIP and the city approves the application, the selected public capital improvements, facilities, and/or development impact fees owed to the city will be financed by the issuance of tax-exempt bonds by CSCDA. CSCDA will form the district and impose an assessment or special tax, as applicable, on the owner's property to repay the portion of the bonds issued to finance the fees paid with respect to the property. No one developer within the SCIP pool is responsible for the payment related to any other project. With respect to impact fees, the property owner will either pay the impact fee at the time of permit issuance and will be reimbursed from the SCIP bond proceeds when the SCIP bonds are issued, or the fees will be funded directly from the proceeds of the SCIP bonds. The benefits of SKIP to the property owner include that only property owners who choose to participate in the program will have assessments or special taxes imposed on their property. Instead of paying cash for public capital improvements and/or development impact fees, the property owner receives low-cost, long-term tax-exempt financing of those fees, freeing up capital for other purposes. The property owner can choose to pay off the assessments or special taxes at any time. For home buyers, paying for the cost of public infrastructure through an assessment or special tax is superior to having those costs rolled into the cost of the home. Although the owner's tax bill would be higher, the amount of the mortgage would be smaller, making it easier to qualify for financing. Moreover, because the assessment and special tax financing is at tax-exempt rates, it typically comes at a lower cost than mortgage rates. And owners of smaller projects, both residential and commercial, can have access to tax-exempt financing of infrastructure. Before the inception of SKIP, only projects large enough to justify the formation of an assessment or community facilities district had access to tax-exempt financing. SKIP can finance projects as low as $500,000, which would not be economical on a standalone basis. So the proposed amended and restated resolution authorizes CSCDA to accept applications from owners of property within the city's planning jurisdiction to apply for tax-exempt financing of public capital improvements and development impact fees through SKIP. It also authorizes CSCDA to form assessment districts and community facilities districts within the city's boundaries, conduct assessment and special tax proceedings, and levy assessments and special taxes against the property of the participating owners. The proposed resolution also approves the form of acquisition agreement to be entered into between the city and the participating property owner or developer, if applicable, to provide the terms and conditions under which financing for public capital improvements will be provided, and to establish the procedure for disbursement of bond proceeds to pay for completed facilities. The resolution also authorizes miscellaneous related actions and makes certain findings and determinations required by law. And it is also important to note that there are no costs to the city for becoming a member of the SKIP. And should the City Council approve the amended and restated resolution to join SKIP, the city will not be liable to repay the bonds issued by CSCDA or the assessments imposed on the participating properties. CSCDA handles all district formation, district administration, bond issuance, and bond administration functions. So why we're here tonight. Tonight's proposed amendments are necessary to the current SKIP resolution for two reasons. First, modifications are proposed to allow financing of fees and facilities through the formation of CFDs in addition to the current assessment district program that was included in the 2018 resolution. By adding CFDs, developers can finance a broader range of city fees such as police, fire, library, general city fees, and housing in lieu fees. This modification will also allow the developer more flexibility in adjusting tax rates by specific product type, assisting in forming separate improvement areas when projects need to be phased, and provide for more facilities to be financed similar in type to the fees. And secondly, the city's participation in SKIP is required to occur following a public hearing. And it has been determined that Resolution 10959 from 2018, the city's current SKIP resolution, was approved on the consent calendar. Amending and restating the resolution as part of this public hearing item will confirm that the city has met the statutory requirements to participate in the SKIP program and will enable developers to utilize this program within the city. So to conclude, staff recommends adopting the amended and restated resolution authorizing the city to join the SKIP with the inclusion of the CFDs. Myself, staff, and CSCDA Managing Director James Hamill, who is virtually attending tonight's meeting, are available for any questions.
Any initial questions from my colleagues? You made a very complicated process really simple, and thank you so much for that.
A lot of big words in that one.
Well, and all the big, so much text on one page, I don't usually try that again. So much text on one page, I don't usually suggest is a good idea. However, that was very simple, so thank you very much for that. Without any questions, just kidding, Vice Mayor Marks.
Yeah, this is only available to the owner of a piece of property, right? Not someone who has like a long-term lease.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. That's my only question.
Thank you. Any public comment?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, without any additional comments, do you have any deliberation or a motion? Vice Mayor Marks?
I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Great, I'll second it. Can we have roll call?
Vice Mayor Marks?
It's not showing.
Yes.
It's not
Mayor
showing.
Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
Yes.
The motion passes 5-0. Technology is our friend today. Thank you very much. And again, also, sorry you had to wait, like Mr. Bringle as well. Well, thank you so much for such a great meeting. There was so much interesting conversation, and I appreciate the deliberation. Now is the point where we have the liaison reports and communications, and we only had 1 week versus the normal 2 weeks in between our meetings. Vice Mayor Marks.
Yes, well, this evening I attended a celebration of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, the closure of the public comment period. The NOAA, the agency that oversees the establishment of marine sanctuaries, received 98,000 comments. 99% of them were supportive of the formation of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. And the closure of the public comment period means that the next step is to designate the sanctuary, and they anticipate that will be happening in May or June of the coming year. So this was a pizza party to celebrate that. I also wanted to say that the Integrated Waste Management Authority, now the joinder, the amendment to the Joint Powers Agreement, the JPA, has gone to all 7 cities. As soon as all 7 cities approve the joinder amendment, the county will, by operation of law, become a member again. And so we're anticipating that'll happen probably by February. So that's all I have to say. It's been a great week.
Those are both really big, exciting news items, and thank you for going to both.
Yeah.
Really quickly, I had the quarterly investment oversight committee on Thursday, and I just want to thank Emily Jackson, the finance director, and Natalie Harnett, as well as Derek Johnson and the team. It was it's always really great to see that our money is doing what it should. I know it sounds simple and basic, but with our ESGs and trying to make sure that we are investing the way that we want for our taxpayers' money, really great. And they're incredibly patient consultants to be able to walk through everything, which is wonderful. Also, I've had a couple of meetings recently around what can we do for people who in our community affected by the Israel-Gaza conflict. So I attended a Zoom meeting by the State Department on Israel and Gaza for mayors. I think there are about 120 mayors that were on the call. And I think the most important thing I can say is that if you know someone that is currently needing help, there is help as far as embassy, that is a U.S. citizen, that is embassy and different resources to be able to get some help. So that was probably the best takeaway I could say. And then Veterans Day, got to attend the Central Coast Veterans Museum event. It was absolutely wonderful. Got to learn even more around the VVA, the Vietnam Veterans Association. There were 2 speakers there, and just about how much work and advocacy there was and still is happening around getting care for our veterans. And that wasn't being done before Vietnam, well, before the soldiers came back from Vietnam, I should say, and had a great speaker, Courtney Morrow, who happens to live up in Templeton as well. So moving on to Councilmember Shorsman.
Yes, it hasn't been very long since our last meeting, so not much to report, but I did attend the Downtown SLO board meeting this morning for Councilmember Pease and shared information about last week's meeting, the results of the parking item, and talked about what we were going to be talking about today, and shared some information about construction project item, downtown construction projects that is on our agenda for December 5th. So, and tomorrow there will be an HSOC meeting, and then Thursday night, a Slow Climate Coalition downtown in the Ludwig Center at 6:30 p.m. for anyone who wants to join.
Thank you. And with that, I hope you all have a good night, and we'll see you back at the holiday parade on December 1st. Hope you have a wonderful next 4 days off for Thanksgiving, and happy holidays.